a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important.
Absolutely heartbreaking words from the father of Grace O'Malley Kumar as he addressed a vigil for the victims of the Nottingham attacks.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 15th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Wherever you're watching, thank you for your company leading the news this morning. The grieving families of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar came together in Nottingham last night for a vigil attended by thousands of mourners. Yesterday, the third victim was named, a 65-year-old school caretaker, Ian Coates.
It comes as new CCTV images appear to show the suspect in the attacks attempting to break into a homeless hostel.
Boris Johnson has called for a Conservative MP on the Privileges Committee to resign just hours before it publishes its report into whether he misled Parliament. The former Prime Minister called allegations that Sir Bernard Jenkin broke COVID rules a total contempt of Parliament.
The Premier League's next season's fixtures are hours away from being announced. Paul Coit will be here with all the latest sport.
And I'll not only talk about that, but also we've got the Ashes, which begins tomorrow, and also plenty of transfers as the transfer window opened yesterday.
Good man, Paul, thank you. And as the Met Office issues new weather warnings, we're going to have your latest forecast.
Another very warm day today for most of us, but it's all about to go bang. Find out more in the weather forecast with me, Eamonn McGibbon from the Met Office.
So some really sad stuff to begin with. This is our top story once again. Nottingham preparing for another vigil today after the absolutely heartbroken families of the two 19-year-old students killed were joined by thousands of people at the university's main campus.
Well, Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar were victims of the knife and van attacks in Nottingham on Tuesday.
David Webber and Sanjoy Kumar, the fathers of the teens, said both their hearts will remain in the city forever.
I'm lost for words. I've lost my baby boy, and I can't even comprehend how I'm going to deal with it. Look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important. I think Grace and her friend, they fell together. And you need to be friends with everyone, and you need to love everyone. And I wish we had more of it.
Well, the very best of humanity on display there, and that very brave and dignified vigil yesterday. And another vigil will be held today in the centre of the city, with the Lord Mayor, representatives from the council and local faith leaders also in attendance.
There is a suspect in custody and the police are still holding him. Let's turn to former Met Detective Chief Superintendent Kevin Hurley. Kevin, a lot of emotion in this. Terrible, terrible, heartbreaking to watch those families and the pain that they are going through. But the police have to stick to their protocol, and they've got to get their evidence right. A lot of people are very impatient for charges to be made.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, any unexpected death, particularly of young people, for the families is shocking and traumatic. And of course, in the police, we deal with that a lot. But you are right. For the police, actually, in investigative terms, although there's a lot of different what we call crime scenes, this is a pretty easy case to put it together because the suspect is pretty clearly identified, and there's going to be a lot of forensic evidence there. I think, and the point I would make, and it is a bit of learning that we still have not woken up to, when we get either these, we get these marauding attackers, whatever their reason, whether it's mental illness or terroristic based, it's just how vulnerable we in society are to the current way in which our police are configured. And I mean by that, it's by luck, really, that unarmed police officers were able to stop this guy and deal with him. Because if this had happened in any of other parts of the country, it would have been the same result, whether it was Weybridge in Surrey or Guildford High Street or Bristol Town Centre. The first officers to be called to these kind of situations are always unarmed and generally unable to deal with it. The learning from this kind of situation, marauding drivers, marauding knife people, is obvious when you look at what happens on the continent. If we look at the Nice lorry driver who killed 80-odd people, normal patrolling police on bicycles used handguns, pistols, to stop him. If you look at the various attackers that occur, even at the Bataclan siege, the initial massacre was slowed down by one officer with a handgun. Because we still persist with this idea of Dixon of Dock Green, keeping our officers unarmed, and we are in fact one of only 3 countries in the world where police are unarmed, Iceland and Norway being the other 2, we the public are left at great risk the next time either a madman or a marauding terrorist or a combination of both sets about doing this. There are many examples in the UK where we've seen this occur. If we remember the case, I think it was Colin Bird up in the Lake District, who ran amok, shot 11 people dead, was actually followed at one time by unarmed police who couldn't intervene. We have the case of the very brave British Transport Police, unarmed apart from a baton, who took on the 3 terrorists at London Bridge and delayed them, but couldn't actually stop them.
But Kevin, a lot of people will be applauding you and saying, here, here. And I think what you're saying is basically if the police were armed, they wouldn't have a suspect in custody. He would be dead by now. But as I understand it, it is police officers themselves on the beat, on the ground, that are against being armed.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, having come from the Metropolitan Police and into London, I can remember the polling where the majority of what you'd call the uniform response, uniform patrol officers, actually polled that they wanted to carry a sidearm. there's this kind of myth that goes on with police officers who patrol in what you might call the nicer areas or sit in offices and so on, who don't go to the last minute 999 calls, not knowing what they're going to face, who say, oh no, we don't want to be armed. And there's also this kind of perception amongst police officers, which is if we carry a firearm and we shoot someone, we'll be pilloried and so on. To some extent, that's true. But the fact of the matter is, no police officer has ever been convicted of unlawfully shooting someone. My position is simple. If you are a police officer and you're going to patrol our streets, whether or not you like it, part of the equipment you will carry is a handgun, because I want you to be able to protect me and mine when I'm in a shopping centre in Guildford or walking down Esher High Street or wherever I am, and someone runs amok and starts shooting, stabbing or running people over. It actually isn't a choice for the police officers as far as I see it.
If I may,
you do the job, carry the weapon.
We were interviewing an eyewitness on the morning of the events, and he was describing hearing shots being fired, and it certainly looked from the windscreen of the vehicle that fires may have been shot. I don't know if we've been told definitively that there weren't shots involved, but of course he was tasered. They're not completely unarmed in the sense that they do have ways of defending themselves, and they successfully apprehended him. I do think it's still open to debate, this whole issue.
Well, 2 points. I mean, that doesn't look like gunshots to me. That looks like a hard bit of the body, either head or an elbows, hit the windscreen. And secondly, taser is actually far less effective at stopping people in terms of using batons on them. What you need is something, when someone's driving a car, running along with a gun, you can stop them decisively. The classic is the marauding terrorist in Streatham High Street a couple of years ago, followed by a surveillance team who knew he would be up to no good, went into a shop, picked up a knife, started stabbing people. Because the surveillance team was armed, they were able to shoot him on the spot. The issue on it is simple. Either we want our police to be able to protect us immediately, or we're prepared to let people die. It's as simple as that.
And the other consequence or effect, Kevin, could be that the marauder, the attacker, knows what the outcome's going to be. They know that if they start something, the chances are they are going to be shot, which may be a huge deterrent.
Well, I mean, if they are, shall we say, fanatically driven, they know they're going to be shot anyway. All it does, it limits the number of innocent people who get maimed and stabbed to death by them.
Yeah. Well, so, we don't know that this...
There's a deterrent.
Yeah. If I can bring it back to this particular incident, though, obviously counter-terrorism police aren't involved and there's no fanaticism involved in this particular incident. Why do you think there hasn't been a charge yet, given that they're not looking for anybody else?
Well, because what you've got to do before you charge is you've got to have all your ducks in the row and all the evidence gathered. And so what they will be waiting for is results back from the forensic science laboratories, which will place this person more closely at the scene so that the case against him is overwhelming. And I'm not, by the way, saying that we should arm police solely to deal with marauding terrorists. I'm also saying there are some people who are so deranged and so violent, perhaps like this guy, that they may need to be stopped immediately. And I'm also not saying he should have been shot dead. I'm merely saying that if police are able to respond quickly in our shopping centre in Woods Green, Oxford High Street or so on, where someone's running amok, they can be stopped from killing and maiming more of us.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, very forthright views there. And we'll ask our listeners and viewers today if they support what you're saying, if they think that is the way it should be. And indeed, if you are a serving police officer, I mean, obviously, we won't read out your name, but, you know, tell us what you think the restrictions are and the pros and cons of what Kevin Hurley had to say. Kevin is a former Met detective, chief superintendent. He knows what he's talking about. 11 minutes past 6 is the time.
Well, footage from a vigil at St Peter's Church in Nottingham after a 31-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of murder after a deadly rampage in the city, which killed 3 people, including 2... Oh, sorry, I don't know why. I thought that was another introduction to a vigil there. That was inaccurately placed. We'll move on to Boris Johnson now. He's called for a Conservative MP on the Privileges Committee to resign just hours before they published their report into whether he misled Parliament.
The former PM has said it was a total contempt of Parliament, referring to allegations that Sir Bernard Jenkin attended a birthday drinks in Parliament while COVID restrictions were in place. Here's the deputy editor of CapEx, Alice Denby, with all of that. The trouble is, when you start slinging mud, somebody slings it back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that's so frustrating about Boris Johnson is that he turns British politics into this kind of fairground hall of mirrors, where the truth and lies collapse into each other. So it's plainly true that this report is a bit of a stitch-up. I think it's pretty clear that Harriet Harman had prejudged him. I think it's obvious that the Sue Gray report was, not particularly credible, given that she's clearly a Labour supporter. But then again, it's also obvious that the behaviour that he was involved in during COVID was completely inappropriate. And if his advisors told him that it was all fine, he shouldn't have listened to them. It's maddening stuff. And also extraordinary to reveal that clearly this was going on all over Parliament. And Rishi Sunak lived in Downing Street at the time. He must have known this was happening as well.
But I mean, it's kind of been established that parties were going on, and that was, not what this inquiry was about. This was about lying to Parliament. And the very fact he's trying to sort of accuse one of the members of the committee of hypocrisy is undermining it again. I mean, you could take Sir Bernard Jenkin out of the committee and you'd still have had the same result.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if it wasn't this that brought Boris Johnson down, it would have been one of the many other self-inflicted scandals that he was involved in. It would have been Owen Paterson, it would have been the Downing Street flat, eventually it was Chris Pincher. So I think that people who are still kind of pining for a Boris comeback are going to be disappointed. I think it's pretty obvious that the Prime Minister's going to have a vote on this report. It's going to be, a slam dunk, and he's going to be blocked out of standing for Parliament in the near future.
I know the authority this committee has, but what is the point? And I mean, you look at the ITV hearing yesterday. What effect? I mean, they don't carry any clout in a court of law in everyday life. They can place restrictions, obviously, within the parliamentary work that people can do. But the reason I say all of this is that you say, for those who are wishing for a Boris comeback, well, Isabel, I think it's fair to say, judging by our inbox, that like 2/3 of people who get in touch with us are looking for a Boris comeback, aren't they?
Yeah. I don't think that the Conservative Party is going to allow that to happen anytime soon, though it would be, you'd be a very foolish person to sort of put Boris down. This is a man who's come back again and again and again, and I'm sure this isn't the last we're going to hear of him. But I think that it's pretty obvious why Rishi Sunak doesn't want to see him standing in Parliament again. He'll be, obviously a thorn in the side of any future Conservative leader. I think people who want him to come back should reflect on what his government actually achieved. So, OK, fine, we got Brexit done, there was the vaccine rollout, but as I say, it was very difficult to actually get anything done because there was endless scandal. And if it wasn't this, it would have been something else.
Can we talk about the peerages row? Because Nadine Dorries, who was the first to resign on Friday, is actually not going ahead and going through with the formalities because she's so upset about not getting a peerage. She wants an investigation into that. Do you think she actually is going to go through with her resignation now?
I think Nadine Dorries is one of the few people in Boris Johnson's life who, instead of getting thrown under the bus by him, is lying down in front of it. I think she is holding back her resignation to make life as awkward as possible for Rishi Sunak. I think she wants to resign in the run-up to Conservative Party conference, and I don't think that the Conservatives are necessarily very confident of holding on to that seat, so she wants to cause as much embarrassment as she possibly can. I'm not sure how much sympathy people should have about her claims that she's, a poor, struggling, working-class girl who got blocked out of the House of Lords by two posh boys. There are plenty of working-class people in the House of Lords. But that said, obviously, she was 18 years in Parliament. She's clearly made a significant contribution to public life.
What contribution are we going to hear? Do you think we will get the committee report this morning, it looks like? And what sort of fuss do you think that will cause?
Well, I think we already know what's going to be in it. We already know that they've recommended that he be suspended from Parliament because he recklessly misled them. That's not going to happen because he's resigned. We know that he's absolutely furious about this. He's slinging as much mud as possible, as you said. But I mean, this is just one of the features of Boris's life, that he's made so many enemies. Him and Bernard Jenkin, I think, have beef from Brexit days. That he's got so few allies left that he may as well just, burn every bridge
What about the sort of bite back of Parliament about these claims of a kangaroo court, which, of course, again, undermines the democratic process, which is very fragile and precious, and they're saying there should be disciplinary action for those that use such a phrase?
I think this committee clearly is... I mean, I don't think I would call it that, but I think it is compromised. You know, I think that MPs who had publicly stated or... you know, retweeted kind of opinions before the committee should have recused themselves. And I think that this whole thing about the Sue Gray report, it is clearly, as I say, a bit of a stitch-up. But really, the person who's done most to undermine our democratic institutions, to undermine Parliament, is Boris Johnson himself.
A kangaroo court is an unofficial court, this is the dictionary definition, an unofficial court held by a group of people in order to try someone regarded, especially without good evidence, as guilty of a crime or misdemeanour. So an example is they conducted a kangaroo court there and then. So saying that it was a prejudiced gathering, really, without good evidence. So, well, you could debate that one till the cows come home, couldn't you?
I think we'll have to see what's in it. I guess the key question is what he knew when and what he said to Parliament.
Yes.
And when he said there were no parties, was that a credible thing to say? I think not really.
So that's all coming out 9 o'clock this morning. We're expecting the anticipation all week. Every day we've said it's going to be today, but we're told 9 o'clock is the one, because there was this delay, wasn't there? Boris's team putting a late submission. I wonder if it was this Bernard Jenkins stuff. Anyway, 9 o'clock, and we will have full coverage of it, of course, throughout the course of the morning and indeed at 9 o'clock when it drops for you here on GB News. Alice Denby, thanks very much.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much indeed. The time, 90 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
A 34-year-old man's died on railway tracks in South London after being chased by police. The Met say officers began pursuing a car after it failed to stop in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Officers lost sight of the driver, and he's believed to have climbed a fence onto the railway line before being pronounced dead at the scene.
Junior doctors in England are continuing their strike action today. Figures show that more than 500,000 appointments and procedures have been postponed since December.
Nearly 1 in 5 adults believe they've missed out on a job because of their background, accent or social status. The Co-op said its survey of 8,500 people found 1 in 10 have been teased over their accent, leading some to change the way they speak when being interviewed.
Well, you see, that's absolutely right. I'm convinced. I mean, in Northern Ireland, you know, we talk with a various range of accents, but basically you can be intimidated into speaking with a sort of transatlantic drawl where you begin to speak more American than anything else.
Intimidated in a job interview sort of scenario?
In any scenario, you know, you have a telephone voice or more than a telephone voice. And, I mean, there are like certain Northern Irish broadcasters who will have this accent that people
You can't identify. I know a few people
where's
like that,
from?
and I would guess they were Northern Irish.
Ruth always says to me, which one of your brothers were you speaking to on the phone? I said, how do you know I was speaking to my brother? She said, because your voice changes. You know, you become much more. But I think we've talked about this, an underrepresentation of accents. I think West Country accents are under.
Not enough.
That's why I love to see Josie Gibson on television. And I think there's certain Lancastrian accents and Yorkshire accents. I think an accent's a beautiful thing. I really genuinely, honestly do.
I agree.
It makes people varied, it makes them different, and there is a domination, of course, particularly on media, that people are expected to conform to a certain pattern.
Anymore. I think that's definitely gone. I think the vast majority of people don't have what would be considered as RV anymore.
Yeah, but would they necessarily be in the top job? Would they necessarily be? I think you're probably right. I tend to agree with you with that. But there you go. That's what people feel in life. And sometimes when people change their accent, they can be a bit ridiculous by doing that. Let us know your views.
A mum battling lung cancer may have to sell her home because she has, quote, the wrong type of cancer.
Her name is Elaine Lynch, and Elaine has been recommended a drug used regularly to treat breast cancer, but not licensed on the NHS for lung cancer patients.
Our reporter Lisa Hartle has been looking into it.
When mum of two, Elaine Lynch, was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2021, she had no idea she'd not just have to fight the disease, but also for the drug that could give her more time.
I want to live as long as I can to make memories with my family and my children. And if this drug is the thing that's going to give me that, then obviously that's what we need to get.
Elaine was told a drug called Enhertu is needed to target her cancer mutation known as HER2. In the UK, it's licensed for treating this type of breast cancer, but not when it develops in the lung. When she was told she could not receive the drug on the NHS, her doctor approached the pharmaceutical company to ask for it on compassionate grounds. They were told no. But the drug is available to buy, so that's what Elaine is trying to do. £9,000 every 3 weeks.
We're fighting the cancer, which is bad enough, but then we've also got all this added stress about trying to find the money to pay for the treatment.
This actually took over our life.
Yeah.
The fighting of the NHS to get this drug through the NHS has took over our lives.
Elaine's children have started a GoFundMe page to try and raise money for her treatment and started a petition calling for change. In the US, it has been approved for lung cancer patients.
Yeah, so I have an example of a patient who is in her 80s and then has been able to go on this drug for almost a year now. She feels very well every day. It shrank her tumors to almost undetectable. It doesn't work for every patient, but for those who does, it's really a fantastic treatment.
Julie Woodington has the same lung cancer and has been told Enhertu is the treatment she needs, but the mum of two can't afford it.
You know, I'm on borrowed time now. And I got a family, so they're driving everything I do. And I just want the best chance, you know. If there's a drug out there that could possibly give me more time, I just want to try it.
The pharmaceutical company Daiichi Sankyo said they don't offer this drug on compassionate grounds. A spokesman for Daiichi Sankyo UK said, "Our thoughts are with the patient and their family. We appreciate the significant impact this devastating condition has on the lives of individuals living with cancer, as well as their families and loved ones. We are working diligently to try to bring this medicine to as many appropriate people as possible. We are going through the appropriate regulatory channels in order to obtain a UK licence. We are unable to speculate on the timelines or outcome of our applications. However, we are committed to working closely with the regulatory authorities to support the process."
I guess people that make these decisions, like the big drug companies, they're kind of so far removed from it that they sort of forget that there's people's lives they're playing with. You never think it's going to happen to you, do you? You kind of know it could, but you never think it is going to happen to you. And you just got to try and live your life, but it's hard. It's really hard, especially as, you know, there could be something out there that could help me and I can't get it.
Lisa Hartle, GB News.
Cancer journey of Elaine Lynch. If you've got anything to add to that, let us know.
Stay with us. Ahead of the 9 o'clock announcement of this year's Premier League fixtures, we'll have all the sport with Paul Coit next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, "Alexa, play GB News." We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Thursday morning, a very good morning to you, whatever you're doing. I mean, I think it's great at this time of the year when the sun is in the sky. The sun and the moon were in the sky together.
Is there a song in there somewhere?
Today.
Felt a song coming on then. No?
No, I'm just observing.
Yeah.
It's the sun and...
It's the 2 weeks of the year that when I drive into work at 3:30 in the morning, the sky isn't black. But the depressing thing is, in 2 weeks' time, when you think summer's just getting underway, it goes black again.
It's not
because,
long enough.
yeah, once the solstice is done, July starts going into winter mode. Cheerful me.
Do you dance for the solstice? Do you go in the back
I don't,
garden?
but I am a summer baby. I just find life
I just wonder,
so
were you a
better in
white
the summer.
witch or anything?
No.
You know, you've got the outfit today.
Ah,
to be.
I'll take what I can from that. Anyway, still on the programme this morning, we have been long warned that the air in cities is bad for us, but now we're being told that the air in your office could be worse.
Okay, so another scary story to scare the wits out of you then at 10 minutes to 7, I think we're doing that. And then at 20 past 7...
That looks delicious.
But it's vegan, right? It may be delicious, and it may be delicious because it's
maybe
vegan.
I'm a secret vegan. I
But
didn't know it.
vegan food companies are going bust, falling into administration, and we're going to be asking if veganism has peaked. Is it on the way out? Or if it is the future of food?
Yeah, that's our debate this morning. In fact, we have a vegan versus a non-vegan, and that should be quite lively, 20 past.
Yeah. And the other thing we're talking about, Indian restaurants. We've got a report coming in from Birmingham that Indian restaurants are really dying out. Now, for what reasons? Is it staffing? Is it cost? Is it our tastes have changed? But it's going to be harder in Birmingham to find a good Indian than it has been in the past.
Just talking about accents, I love it when you say Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Lots of views
like
coming...
I say Nottingham as well.
Yeah, yeah. Just funny accents.
Maybe I should just recite all the main
phone book.
cities in Britain to keep you amused.
Getting lots of views coming in already, and this one from Ian, I just want to read out. Is Talk Sports lost GB News' brilliant game? Find out after this.
Yeah, so I was just working out. Is Laura Woods coming to us then?
No.
Huh?
No.
Well, who could it be?
Who could it be?
Who could it be?
Who could it be?
It could be me.
It could be me. We're so thrilled.
Honestly, I've always wanted to be on Stars in Their Eyes.
You made the right decision. You made the right decision there.
I think so too.
Back pages, which Paul's going to be discussing next, they stack up like this morning. The Mail, I'll smash the Aussies. England's wonder kid Harry Brook promised to fight the fire off the Australian paceman with some fire of his own in the upcoming Ashes. Here's the Express. Arsenal exploring a shock move for Chelsea forward Kai Havertz as they look to renew themselves ahead of another Premier League title race. And here is the Metro. Jude's a real superstar. Real Madrid have signed the England midfielder in a deal worth £88.5 million, and with add-ons and all sorts of things, it could rise to 115 million. See, I'm surprised, Paul, that Bellingham is signed for a German team, because, I mean, the German leagues, you know...
No, signed for Real Madrid from Dortmund.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
no, you're right.
Yes.
Wake up, Eamonn.
I was surprised too. In fact, Jude Bellingham was on the phone going, what have I done?
So he's at Real.
He's
at
gone to Real
Madrid, right. OK, so they've spent their money. And I wonder then, does that leave them with any for Harry Kane? Does that complicates the market there?
Don't you start me with that one. I see what you're doing. Are you worrying me about Harry? No, Harry's not going anywhere, I don't think. Because there's two clubs that could have signed him, and Manchester United was one, of course. But they have now said, look, we're out of the race. Doesn't look like it's going to happen because I don't think Daniel Levy's going to sell him. And same with Real Madrid as well. So he won't be going anywhere this summer. Next year, end of the contract. So is he going to sign a new contract, or maybe he won't?
He's older. He'd be well over 30 then, wouldn't he?
Well, 30, yeah. He will be 30. So so we'll see with that. But as far as Jude Bellingham goes, the great news for Jude Bellingham, or more so for, I should say, for Birmingham City, which is where he started. Yeah. He made his debut at 16. They're going to make £6 million out of this.
That's good to hear.
Which is great, because they're a club that's struggling with FFP that we've mentioned, and financial fair play, owing a lot of money. So that £6 million going to come in very handy.
Here's something that's exciting me.
Yes.
At 9 o'clock today, the Premier League fixtures for the season ahead are going to be announced. Always very exciting. And to see, you know, the name of, like, say, Luton.
Isn't that great?
There.
What, so Luton could be playing Man City?
They will be, yeah.
Gosh, I don't fancy that for them.
Honestly,
I know you worry for them already.
It's incredible, actually, when you see the Luton. I've never been to... It's Kenilworth Road, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
I've never been to Kenilworth Road, but basically you get a row of terraced houses, and then there's a space with a gate into the football ground, and then a row of terraced houses.
Oh, wow.
And it's like camouflaged. It's like... I mean, they're bound to be looking for a new stadium. I mean, especially if they're in the Premier League.
Is that how Goodison Park, the old one, started out?
Same thing. Yeah. There's two clubs that are like that. Obviously, Goodison Park's much bigger, and now they're building the new Bramley Dock Stadium, which will be ready next year. Oh, I thought. But then you've got Luton, like you say, Kenilworth Road. They are looking at a new stadium. They've done that over the past few years. But there's something. You know, you like me, I love a throwback to old-style football.
Incredible.
It's fantastic.
I mean, there are these identikit stadiums. There are loads of stadiums like Derby and Sunderland and Bolton, and they're all the same. Yeah. They're all the same capacity.
They build them outside the town, easy to get to, you know, and it keeps everybody away. But you're talking about the Premier League fixtures, so that comes out 9 o'clock this morning. So just when you think the football's over, then we're bringing out the Premier League fixtures.
But it's important, you know, to get your plans and your diary.
Of course it is.
Well, actually, it's not, because say you're in Ireland, for instance, and you go to book flights. Well, then everything changes with TV. They do the fixtures, and then things changes with TV and whatever. But how do they do it? How do they work out who plays who and when?
Right. Well, they start out quite a while ago and then think, right, OK, firstly, we've got to work out internationals, FA Cup games. So mainly internationals is the first thing for the international break. So then there's the little gap there. Then there's a way of doing it. So there are also dates. They'll go to the club and say, right, is there any dates that you can't play at home on for any reason? For example, like we've seen it when stadiums are being refurbished, they might have something there and they say, look, we'd rather not play the first game at home. That's fine. So that's done. And then it works to a formula. So each club, it's like a pairing grid. So each club will have like, for example, it'll be United and City. So one is at home, the other one's away. Spurs, Arsenal, Liverpool, Everton. So then they'll be put into this pairing grid. Now, then they're mixed up randomly, and then any 5 matches. So the rules that go into it, no club can play 3 games at home in a row. Yeah. And the same thing goes for away. So it's either 3, 2, that's the most it can possibly be.
And then I suppose the police have a say.
They do.
As to what time of the day and if it can happen on that particular day.
They need to look at that, because of also travel is another thing as well. So even when it comes to the EFL, there's not too many areas, so the trains are going to be full up with fans from different clubs. Also, the other thing is that if you play on Boxing Day, you will be away on New Year's Day. I was not aware of this, but that goes in. So when it comes to Christmas...
So what if you're at home on Boxing Day, you're away on New Year's Day?
And vice versa as well.
It'll be all decided by AI before long.
It will. Even the games probably will be in the end, Izzy, I reckon. But it's released at 9 o'clock, so the first games are on Saturday, August the 12th. This is the day, or especially last night, when people start going, oh, I've seen them. And then you get this list. I mean, I've been shown some even today. Go, look,
have you?
There's the list.
Everyone thinks they've got the scoop.
It's nonsense. It's kept away. Because they've even got the times. I'll tell you how you can work out that they're fake, is because you've got little times. For example, that's going to be the 12:30 kickoff. That's going to be on the Sunday. Yeah. But the TV, it's down to the TV channels to decide when they are. But anyway, everything's put in, the computer pumps them out, and then we'll get them at 9.
We still have, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and I just can't remember if this is right or not, do we have certain days that are like local derby days. Like everybody, it's all the local derbies.
It used to be at Christmas because they try and do it so...
Keep people at home, no travelling.
Don't have to travel so far. And they still do that within reason. So, for example, I mean, Manchester United will not be travelling, you know, a long distance. It just won't happen. So you won't get a Southern team go up to Newcastle. So they try and keep them fairly close. So that'll be part of the... Is it an algorithm?
Algorithm.
Is it an
probably
algorithm?
is.
I think it might be an algorithm.
9 o'clock, and they'll be released Premier League fixtures for 23-24. There we go. Thanks, Paul. We'll speak again 8:20.
Look forward to it.
OK, thank you very much.
Right, stay with us. We're about to discuss the grilling given to ITV boss yesterday. We'll go through the papers with Freddie Gray and Stephanie Tetchy next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Right, we are going through the papers. We're joined this morning by Freddie Gray and Stephanie Tetchy to go through those, and we're going to take a look at your front pages, first of all, with any luck, or perhaps we'll just, starting with the Times. We'll just move on to the Times.
Nottingham attacks are featuring in most of the papers today, and they feature heartbreaking photographs of the parents of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, and one of the... a number of vigils that we're expecting. There was one last night, and there will also definitely be one today.
In the Mail, 2 fathers lost in grief, Sanjay Kumar and David Webber, coming together yesterday, pictured on many of the papers, in fact, the mothers as well. They urged students to look after each other.
Telegraph lead with Boris Johnson's accusations that senior Conservative MPs are guilty of hypocrisy, and that Partygate report will be released later this morning. The Eye says homeowners are turning their backs on the Conservatives as rising interest rates increase the cost of mortgages.
And we're going through the papers this morning in more detail with the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the journalist Stephanie Tetchy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
Steph, should we start in Nottingham?
Yeah.
That vigil yesterday, really hard to watch, but also... I found it to be uplifting.
Yeah.
It was sort of the very best of humanity, and I really think you all kind of imagined either your own father or your own children. Very, very powerful.
It's just heartbreaking stuff to watch, to read about, to hear about. You know, when these kind of barbaric incidents happens, it's just like the worst of humanity. But with grief, even though it's so poignant and it's so sad, there is power of support and there's power of people coming together. And I've always felt that no parent should ever bury their child. And seeing those two fathers there, just less than 3 days ago, they've lost their children. It's just, you can't make no sense of it. And I think to myself, they're so brave because I don't have children, but I would not be able to put myself together to stand there and even talk about my child who was just passed less than 3 days ago. It doesn't make sense. With the two victims, they had their whole life ahead of them. They were just celebrating completing the first year of uni. But then also we have to think about the caretaker as well, who was on the other end of the scale, who was just 4 months away from retirement, who was also reaching a special milestone in his life.
Ian Coates,
as well.
65 years of age, and on his way to work doing a noble, honourable job, being a school caretaker, and probably loving his job and wondering what retirement held for him. And there it was.
He also used to take underprivileged kids fishing. And he was a sort of civic-minded person. And it's the senselessness of all of this that is so horrifying. And
how random it is.
So random. And also, we don't really know about the patients in hospital that, were hit by the van. We know that one of them was critical, but God forbid that the death toll increases.
Well, it is odd that we don't know more, and this does happen with these attacks quite a lot now. There's an element of sort of mystery about it, and it fades out of public consciousness. I think it's obviously a horrific story. I do think it's a good thing that it is on the front pages of all the papers today, pretty much, and the focus is rightly on the victims, not the perpetrator. Normally there's a sort of hunt for the perpetrator. But, in France, these attacks happen quite a lot, often terrorist-related. We do not know whether it's terrorist-related in this incident, or that it hasn't been ruled out. And when it becomes so regular, it becomes almost monotonous, and we become dull to it. And it's heartwarming that we are still shocked by it in a way, and that we are still thinking about the people who suffer as a result of these terrible, terrible acts.
Freddie, there's a story here which, according to my info, doesn't marry up here, but it's about retired doctors and using them, and it says front page of the Telegraph, which it's not on the front page of the Telegraph that I can see. Is that a story that you want to talk about?
That is a story I can talk about, yes. It's retired doctors given work from home offer. This is obviously the government's desperate attempt to get more doctors into the NHS, and they're urging retired doctors to come out of retirement and work. And this is already happening to a certain extent. But the NHS want to ramp that up. And so doctors out there, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're going to be called back to do your duty.
Well, called back, but given, tax relief and special concessions, working from home, and all these junior doctors are working all the hours.
Well, there's 7.4 million people on the waiting list, so something needs to be done. We are importing more doctors.
But you see, what I'm not sure about this is I can understand how we've got to fill the gap and whatever, but how involved these doctors will actually be, right? They are video consultations. They can be from any part of the country. You can get anybody, you can get somebody, I don't know, from Burnley and you're in Guildford, and does that make a difference? Probably not if they have the knowledge. But I just worry about what's his name? It's gone from me now, Doctor. That awful murder, Shipman. In a Shipman sort of situation that they can say anything and do anything and write a prescription for anything. I mean, there's just not that involvement. It's certainly not as we used to know it.
Yes, I mean, you will have to keep the sort of quality, the standard of our healthcare as high as we possibly can. That means having the best qualified and best doctors we can have. But I mean, these are retired doctors who are fully qualified. We're not talking about.
And I would like to think such doctors would have integrity. And I think right now, Eamonn and Isabel, it's like people need to see doctors. Like any little help, any little thing will help, because there's so many people out there who are going undiagnosed. They're having to wait months just to see a doctor. So if you can get someone online who is knowledgeable and who is credible, I think it's the right move.
I wonder how up to to date they are with the latest procedures and techniques and all that sort of thing. I don't look. Listen, it's better than the system that we're in at the moment. And it's not been able to see anyone.
I've started using this thing called DocTap. You know about that?
Yes, I think they did
It's just-
vaccinations.
There's lots of different ones, but
you can turn up
DocTap,
anywhere.
it's 40 quid, but it does mean you don't have to deal with my GP surgery. It's completely hopeless.
And that is a video link up, is it?
You can do it by video for, I think, 40 quid, and I think it's about 60 quid for an appointment in person. I just saw one on Monday for my hip,
Oh no!
which I'm pleased to tell you is all fine.
Oh good.
Why didn't you just phone me about your hip? I'm
well-
a hip expert.
Well, I don't know what I've done. I think it was picking up some furniture, and I thought it might be. Anyway, I don't want to get into it with all your viewers with it, but it was.
How old are you, Freddie?
43.
Oh, it's gone. It's
Yeah,
gone.
I really.
I'll have to get that whipped out in the next 10 years. Anyway.
Oh God.
Let's talk about homeowners. Jeremy Hunt backing this new rate hike, obviously, because he wants to get inflation under control. But where we are in terms of mortgages, everybody making this comparison to when Liz Truss was in office. And, you know, the heat will be felt, won't it now, for
Well, it is, and it's sort of...
Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak.
It's sort of a slow-motion crisis, this one. Whereas Truss was a sort of, explosive disaster, very, very quick. This is sort of bubbling up, and now I think we're getting 25% increase in mortgage defaults now, which means that obviously with interest rates going up and a lot of people with very, very large mortgages, repaying those loans, repaying the interest on those loans is going to become impossible for a lot of people.
Impossible is the right word for it. I mean, if you you're on a fixed budget, a fixed salary, whatever, and someone says, well, that's going to be another 300 extra quid a month.
Yeah.
It just doesn't magically appear.
No, and I mean, well, everyone I know is fixed in for a bit longer, but they know it's coming. In a year and a half for me, and people are terrified. And it's not just it's not just people not budgeting properly. It's that we have to, because property has been so expensive, particularly in certain parts of Britain, we have taken on huge loans to be able to afford a home. And if the Tories are struggling, they're now 15 points behind Labour with homeowners. That is the Tory party is supposed to be the party of home ownership. It's very, very bad news. And Jeremy Hunt is sticking with this line. And I think he is perhaps right to say this, that inflation is such a monster that we have to risk recession in order to tackle it.
I think having a mortgage is like having a ticking time bomb now. I think before it used to look so...
Do you have a mortgage?
No, I don't. I was due to get a mortgage before Liz's Truss mini budget.
And now you're thinking...
Yeah, I'm just like, I've been saved and I really wanted one, and now I'm just like, it's not worth it. Before I thought it would be this badge of honour, but I'm like, is it worth getting into all the debt and having my first home and then just being crippled and poverty-stricken? It doesn't seem worth it.
There's so many awful things about it. Legal fees, right? You sit and say, how much? How much for signing that bit of paper off or whatever? And stamp duty, absolutely more. Well, stamp duty, that's just a way of saying, what other way can we steal money from you?
Oh,
here's an idea.
What it is.
Sold in this country, the legal hoops that you have to jump through, the process is just awful.
It's like
And the estate agents, don't get me started. The percentage.
I was just going to say, I loathe stamp duty.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrendous.
As you pay it, you think, I bought three, we've had 3 different houses now, and every time I just think, you're just paying for that stamp of a bit of paper.
Yeah.
And that's real.
Why they get away with it? Why they think, actually, there's Freddie, he's stretching himself to buy a new house. Actually, he can afford another 40 grand or 50 grand on top of that.
Yeah.
What a lot of...
Where does all this money go?
Well, exactly. And
Where does it go?
That's the question. That is
Where does it go?
We'll have more papers just after 7:30. But for now, Stephanie and Freddie, we'll let you go and get another cup of coffee, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
You get an awful lot of coffee from Brazil.
Yeah.
That's a song.
Oh.
You get an awful lot of coffee from Brazil.
Never heard that one.
OK, 10 to 7 is the time. Let's bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise.
A report concluding that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson misled Parliament is to be published at 9 o'clock this morning. The Privileges Committee will decide whether Mr Johnson committed a contempt of Parliament by misleading MPs by denying lockdown rules were broken at Downing Street. Johnson quit as an MP on Friday after receiving its verdict.
At least 79 people have drowned after an overloaded migrant boat capsized and sank off the southern coast of Greece. The search is continuing for survivors. It's believed around 750 people were on board. Local media says that the boat was on its way to Italy, having departed from the south of Crete.
One of 3 Britons who died after a boat caught fire in Egypt has been named as Christina Quinn. The 58-year-old was taking part in a scuba diving lesson when the vessel burst into flames on Sunday. It's understood the fire was caused by an electrical problem in the boat's engine room.
This is a story that's going to make you choke. Yet another one. The air. You see, you say, get outside and get some good fresh air.
Yeah, fresh air.
There may be a lot in that, because the air inside in your home, in your office, could be poisoning you. It could be 5 times more lethal than any sort of contamination that you would get outside.
Activities such as cooking, would you believe, cleaning and heating release high levels of carbon monoxide.
Now, with us, the man who's going to tell you all about this is Professor Nick Munro. Poor quality air. Nick, how bad is it? What can it lead to?
Well, morning. I might say there's hope, so one needs to focus on being informed rather than necessarily alarmed. But where you have poor quality air, and that can be air that has too much particulate in it, too much carbon dioxide in it, or too many chemicals, then those do impact on health. And so understanding what the air quality is at any one time is important, in order that you can then make decisions about what you do to mitigate that, whether that is simple stuff, open a window, for instance, or more complex stuff, like manage the system in a building to optimise the air quality.
Oh, Nick, where do we begin? Well, I suppose we begin with what you're talking about. But look, if you talk about, say you go into a home or an office, whatever, and the air's stagnant in it, what's the first thing you do? You lift a freshener and go...
Or you light a scented candle if you're at home and it smells.
You light a scented candle, or you plug something into the wall.
Or you're cold and you put the log burner on.
So are you worried about all those things?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Indeed so. And the thing is that smell can be can cause us to make decisions, but actually smell can disguise the quality of the air. So air fresheners, for instance, and you spray that aerosol or whatever, and immediately it's going to smell nicer. But the reality is that what you've put into the air is a pollutant. And actually, do we understand that? And do we understand the impacts of that? Probably not quite as well as we need to. And therefore, whether it's that air freshener, whether it's that scented candle, do you reach for that, or do you first reach for the window?
Well, you say do you reach for the window. I mean, a huge number of our audience will live out in the countryside, lovely big gardens, lots of trees. But then there's the other group of us who live in cities, and I think of myself, I live on a junction, and there's idling cars outside my house 50% of the time. My kids are sitting watching TV and I have the window open, they're breathing in idling fumes. I'd rather have the window closed, but you're telling me the air inside could also be bad. So what do I do in that scenario?
Well, I mean, there are big fixes there, for instance, and long-term fixes with regard to the air that's being polluted outside by those engines that are idling. And even, I think there was a piece recently, just the other day, about ice cream vans that sit there with their diesel engines chugging over.
Whilst the kids at the height of the exhaust are queuing up.
Yeah. Well, those things need to change.
Absolutely.
And we know that there are changes that are happening there, but those are not overnight changes.
But I know you say to inform rather than to alarm, right? So I'm queuing up for my 99. Really, in that minute and a half or so that I do that, am I going to be harmed in any way?
Well, potentially, yeah, because what comes out the back end of an ice cream van is unpleasant, dangerous, and can cause harm, and that kind of harm is cumulative. So if you sit there with regard to, if you continue to ingest the particulates that are coming out of the ice cream van, then you will have a long-term problem.
Such as what, like dementia?
It can cause all kinds of different outcomes in truth.
Give us some examples.
Well, the one that you just picked on is a good one, for sure. So there are some things there that it's important to be motivated to fix Let's not use the word alarm, but actually it's important to step towards fixing those matters. And if we understand them, and that's increasingly where we are, and if we have standards and regulation that control them, and that's likewise increasingly where we're getting to, then there's hope that we can have the right outcome. But understanding comes first.
What about those air purifiers that are on the market? I think Dyson does one, there are other ones available. Hugely costly, but do they actually work?
Yeah, some of them are very effective, but again, do you understand and do you have the information to...
No.
There you go.
No, because you see, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking an air freshener's good, all the things that I put in my life.
Candles.
My car's going to smell nice, my house is going to smell nice. And then all the foul things that I think I'm getting away from. Is there any air that's pure, my friend? Is there any air? We're sitting in the studio, people clean the table with, Mr. whatever it is, or other brands are available, you know, cleaning surfaces, vacuuming things. Is our air not just a risk? All air is polluted. No?
Well, to a certain extent. I mean, if you fly home to Belfast and you go a little bit north of there, then you're going to find some of the sweetest and cleanest air in the country.
Am I really?
You are indeed, yeah.
What's calling you, Eamonn?
Well, I think if you were going up to Ballyvaughan, for instance, and so on, then you would find very clean air in those sort of locations. But we don't all live in those circumstances, and neither can we. So in cities where you have terrific reasons to be, whether it's economic, cultural, education, whatever, that's where we all exist. And that's the future of sustainability, for instance, in truth.
OK. Professor, I've got to interrupt you. We've got to take a break. Really lovely to get your take on all of this. Thanks very much indeed,
pleasure.
Professor Nick Munro.
I'm not even going to take a deep breath in case I poison myself. But as you say, be informed rather than alarmed about these things. Yeah. Will that change? Would you do let us know? Stay with us. We're going to bring you the latest from Nottingham, including the words of the grieving fathers of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important.
The heartbreaking words of the father of Grace O'Malley Kumar as he addressed a vigil for the victims of the Nottingham attacks.
It's 7 o'clock, or 1 minute past 7 on this Thursday, 15th of June. Breakfast in GB News, Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The grieving families of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar came together in Nottingham last night for a vigil attended by thousands of mourners. Yesterday, the third victim was named as 65-year-old school caretaker Ian Coates.
And more than 2 days after these attacks, the suspect is still in custody with no sign of charges or indeed any indication for the motive for these attacks.
That comes as new CCTV footage shows the suspect in the attacks attempting to break into a homeless hostel.
Boris Johnson's called for a Conservative MP on the Privileges Committee to resign just hours before it publishes its report into whether he misled Parliament. The former PM called allegations that Sir Bernard Jenkins broke COVID rules a total contempt of Parliament.
When it comes to what you eat, is the age of veganism over? One plant-based company in Leeds has gone into administration, and we'll be asking, is meat coming back on the menu?
And as the Met Office issues new weather warnings, we'll have your latest forecast.
Another very warm day today for most of us, but it's all about to go bang. Find out more in the weather forecast with me, Eddie McGibbon from the Met Office.
So it is our top story this morning. Nottingham is preparing for another vigil today after the heartbroken families of the two murdered 19-year-old students were joined by thousands of people at the university's main campus last night.
Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar were victims of the knife and van attacks in Nottingham on Tuesday. David Webber and Sanjoy Kumar, the fathers of the teens, said both their hearts will remain in the city forever.
I'm lost for words. I've lost my baby boy, and I can't even comprehend how I'm going to deal with it. Look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important. I think Grace and her friend, they fell together, and you need to be friends with everyone, and you need to love everyone, and I wish we had more of it.
Really powerful there. Let's get an update now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White, this morning. Good to see you, Mark. You remain in Nottingham today. What more can you tell us?
Well, the police investigation is still going on, and more than 2 days after these attacks unfolded, no charges yet laid against the prime suspect, who's still in custody. And we were told as of yesterday from sources that he's not cooperating with the ongoing investigation. It's still being assisted by counter-terrorism officers because as yet they don't have a motivation for this, and the fact that the suspect is not being cooperating makes that task all the more harder. Where I am is Milton Street. This is the area where those three members of the public were run down by this stolen van. Of course, one of those members of the public still critically ill in hospital. We can speak now actually to Arslan Aftab, who is a local security guard for a car park just nearby. You were here at the time. Thanks very much for speaking to us live on GB News. Tell us, Arslan, what did you see?
So basically it was around about 5:30 when I did my last patrol, came out and I was trying to cross obviously through the, when I came, the police shut it down. Soon as I was thinking to myself, it was okay, but then literally in about half an hour, all the roads were blocked off. Milton Street was blocked off. Obviously, Upper Parliament was blocked off. You had like rescue services, you had fire brigade, everything, and literally I've seen armed officers everywhere. And then I told the police I need to go because obviously I work at the car park, and then the police let me go. And literally I seen the guy. They were just taking him in the ambulance, and then but that's about it.
And he looked badly injured.
Oh yeah, he was looked badly injured. Obviously I didn't see the guy do it when it happened. but it was just shortly after that. And then literally after that, then the police came. They wanted to obviously close the car park. They didn't want anyone in and out. They didn't want anyone going across the road or anything. They were just investigating. And then when I came on the shift, they were still investigating about 7, half 7. It was still, then they opened it up. And I mean, it's hard times. You wouldn't expect this in Nottingham because I've been living here all my life. I've never witnessed something like that. And, you know, I don't know what the world's gone up to. You know, people's mentalities have changed. Why would you do that? Like, I mean, if it's like you're killing like 3 people, you know, but humanity is not like that. Humanity is about peace. You know, we should think about peace, about each other. And, you know, it's hard times. Like, you can't imagine this happening in Nottingham. Nottingham's like beautiful place. You got obviously Victoria Centre, you got shops around. And that day, I literally seen, I've never seen Nottingham that dead, meaning as like people used to come out, it's obviously summer, people want to come enjoy themselves, you know, go out for a pint or, you know, go socialise with friends, and they couldn't do that because of that situation.
And when you saw, of course, all of these armed police, I mean, like any city, there are armed patrols that you'll see from time to time, but to see streets blocked off, armed officers swarming into the area, what was going through your mind?
Like, I was thinking to myself, am I really in Nottingham? Like, you know, you've seen armed officers. You'll probably see, on a normal day, you've probably seen just 1 or 2 cars just patrolling around. But when you see like the 6, 7 armed forces, like proper armed forces patrol cars, you'd be like, what's happened? And plus, when you see like about 20 to 25 ambulances around, when you see rescue teams around, you know, and then when you especially see, then later on, obviously terrorism police came as well, and then, you know, it was a hard situation. And I don't know what people think, like they can get away with it. They shouldn't get away with it. But end of the day, the thing is, we're here, like I said before, humanity is about peace. You know, it shouldn't happen like this. It's just terrible.
Okay, well, Arslan Aftab, thank you very much for speaking to us. We really do appreciate that. 2 days on from this attack, you didn't have to come up to us, but he wanted to speak to us and share what he saw that morning as the events unfolded. And as I say, you know, this investigation still very active. The police believe it was an isolated incident, but not yet ruled out as there being a terrorist motivation.
Mark, well, look, hearing the comments at the vigil, the comments from your guest there, the utter rejection by everybody of what happened in Nottingham is hugely heartening. Thanks very much, Mark. We'll be back with you a little bit later on in the programme.
And let's not forget the caretaker who was part of all of this as well. Ian Coates, 65 years of age, school caretaker. He was in charge of the van that was then hijacked and approaching his retirement and looking forward to his retirement. And so sad, all of this. And I just wonder, did the parents of Barney and Grace know each other before all of this? I mean, their children died together. And I wonder, did the families...
Unlikely, I'd imagine, university children are being off, unless they were a couple. But, you know, parents don't know. It's the first time that your kid very often leaves you, isn't it, when they go off to university, and they're all due to come home any day. And it's just the absolute worst nightmare of any parent, and articulated so powerfully by their fathers yesterday.
Boris Johnson has called for a Conservative MP who is on the Privileges Committee to resign just hours before that committee publishes its report into whether he misled Parliament.
Well, the former PM said it was a total contempt of Parliament, referring to allegations that Sir Bernard Jenkin attended a birthday drinks in Parliament while COVID restrictions were in place.
With her view, Deputy Editor of CapEx, Alice Denby. Alice, what do you make of it?
I think we should take a step back, because this isn't a story about the careers of 2 big beasts of the Conservative Party. The reason this matters is because 200,000 people died during COVID, and every single person in the country made sacrifices and went through enormous tribulations during the pandemic. And in the meantime, Boris Johnson and others in Parliament were not behaving in the way the rest of us were. That's why it matters. And that's the real contempt of the British people, I think, that's an issue here.
Although the actual issue, I mean, I suppose that's been established, hasn't it, that the parties took place, and we've been through all that, and we almost don't want to revisit it. What this particular report at 9 a.m. will say is whether Boris Johnson lied about it, and not only lied about it, but lied about it in Parliament, where you are expected to jump through hoops to prove that you are speaking the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty clear. We know what this report is going to say, that he recklessly misled Parliament and that he should be suspended. And of course, as you say, our institutions are incredibly important, and being honest at the dispatch box is one of the most kind of crucial founding principles of our democracy. But I mean, that said, I think if it wasn't this that was going to bring Boris Johnson down, it would have been some other scandal. Any of the other self-imposed scandals that he got involved in, was it the Downing Street flat, was it Owen Paterson, was it Chris Pincher? It would have been something else. This was a man who was unsuitable to be Prime Minister, I'm afraid.
Although still has a huge core of support, Nadine Dorries among those. She was the first to say she was going to resign on Friday. Appears to be delaying that resignation. Questions about whether she will even see it through now that she won't be getting a peerage.
I mean, I think by a huge core of support, I think he clearly does have a following among the British public, and I know he's popular with your viewers, but I think in the Conservative Party, his core of support is Nadine Dorries. I think that's it. And she is clearly trying to kick up as much of a fuss as she possibly can to make life difficult for Rishi Sunak. She's reportedly delaying her resignation in order to force a by-election in the run-up to Conservative Party conference. I don't think the party is necessarily confident of holding that seat, so that would clearly be very embarrassing. It is that there are so many individuals within the Conservative Party that seem to hate each other.
Well, exactly, with this close to an election, which is obviously not a good idea for anyone that wants to stay in power. Just lastly, what's happening on Monday? There's going to be a vote in Parliament on all of this.
Yes, so Rishi Sunak is keen to have a vote to basically confirm the findings of the committee. I think it'll be expected that a kind of overwhelming majority of Conservative MPs will vote to support their findings, and I think that will be seen as a kind of block to any chance of Boris Johnson standing as a Conservative in the near future.
OK.
How do we know Bernard Fox was at a party, or Bernard Jenkins?
I don't know. I mean, I think this was a story that was on Guido Fawkes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, someone clearly on Boris's side has revealed this information.
Yeah. So here we go again. Yeah, OK. Thank you very much indeed, Alice. The time, 13 minutes past 7 o'clock on radio, on television, online. This is Breakfast on GB News. The rest of today's top stories are these.
A 34-year-old man's died on railway tracks in South London after being chased by police. The Met Police say officers began pursuing a car after it failed to stop in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Officers lost sight of the driver, and he's believed to have climbed a fence onto the railway line before being pronounced dead at the scene.
Junior doctors in England are continuing their strike action today. Figures show that more than 500,000 appointments and procedures have been postponed due to industrial action since December.
Nearly 1 in 5 adults believe they've missed out on a job because of their background, accent or social status. The Co-op said its survey of 8,500 people found 1 in 10 had been teased over their accent, some changing the way they speak as a result.
Julie says, I love the fact that GB News has a variety of presenters with many different accents. I thoroughly enjoy listening to them all.
We should salute the vast variety of accents in a country so small geographically as ours. They vary over a distance of a very few miles and should be celebrated, says Fred. Absolutely agree.
That is a very shrewd point there as well, because accents change. I mean, it's hard to say, for instance, someone has an Irish accent, because there are so many different accents, like in Ireland. I mean, a Belfast accent's different than a Newry accent, is different than a Derry accent, is different than a Dublin accent, is different
it's
than
the same
a
with
Cork
Scottish,
accent.
isn't it? I mean, we've got a Scottish makeup artist and we've got a Scottish editor of the programme. The two of them sound entirely different. I made them both say the same word earlier, and it was Lucy said therapist, and Khan said therapist. I don't know, I can't do the accent, but it's wonderful to hear all the variations.
We love the variety.
Pauline, I've lived in South Africa for 36 years, and I still have a strong Cockney accent. I get asked all the time where I'm from. It is who I am, and that's true. It defines us very often, doesn't it?
Just a point there, we did a news story about someone being chased by police, and this is a recurring theme now. It appears that if you are chased in any way or followed by police, it's the police's fault. I'm not saying it isn't, and I'm not saying these things are out of line, but this is a growing trend where if police are in pursuit, that seems to be wrong. Give us your view on that one. How do the police do their job if they're not in pursuit, whether that person is innocent or guilty of what goes on? GB Views at gbnews.com.
Coming up, we are talking about veganism. Lots of vegan food companies have been going into administration. So we ask, is the trend on the way out?
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
7:20. Hello, good morning. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
At 7:45, we're going to go through all the details of a new report that reveals households have been saddled with 3 million faulty smart meters due to a badly botched rollout. Should be 100% of houses with those by now, but
I don't even know if I've got a smart meter.
I've got one. And I feel like it gaslights me every time I put the toaster or the washing machine on. Shouts at me, telling me how much energy I'm using.
And do you listen to it?
No. But at least I know what I'm doing.
At least you know. In America, officials have blocked the release of Prince Harry's visa application and the details on it. 8:45 this morning, Kinsey Schofield live with us in the studio as opposed to being in LA where she normally is.
And you can join in any of our discussions. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.com.
We want to talk about Indian takeaways, Indian restaurants, and Birmingham in particular, famous for curry areas in Birmingham, and Balti became one of the staple dishes in the city after its arrival in the 70s. But after an initial boom, and there were 30 restaurants, there are now only 4 in what is known as the Balti Triangle. Why is that?
It's really sad. Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson went along to try out the dish and to find out whether it's got a future.
The Birmingham Balti, invented in the city in the 1970s and hugely popular in the 80s and 90s, the dish has become well known all over the world. The 30 restaurants that served the curry then became famous for the triangle shape in which they were located, and the Balti Triangle was born. But despite the early boom, today only 4 of the original restaurants remain. One of those is Shabab's, which prides itself on being the home of the Birmingham Balti. Owner Zaf Hussain says even though restaurants have been lost, he's proud of the Balti legacy.
I just feel so proud, serving the Balti the right way. Someone who might be visiting from, overseas or whatever else, and they've never sampled a Balti before, and we are here at Shabab's showcasing the Balti and showcasing Birmingham. I'm gutted to see a lot of Balti houses alongside us have closed down, but you can't take away the fact, you can't take away the history that this is still the Balti Triangle, and I feel quite proud to sort of take that legacy forward.
But what makes a Balti a Balti? Zaf gave GB News a look into the kitchen to show us how it's done.
So this is what a proper Balti bowl is. Thin pressed carbon steel, actually manufactured in Birmingham as well. So, turn the heat up, bit of veg oil, in goes some onions, green pepper, tomato, and a chili for good luck.
Unlike other curries, the dish is traditionally served with a naan, not rice, and the proof of the Balti is in the eating.
Well, it's certainly passed the taste test, but what is the future of the Balti?
Andy Munro is the secretary of the Association for the Protection of the Authentic Balti. He says despite changes in eating habits in the area, the dish remains a firm favourite for people visiting Birmingham.
In this area, there's a lot of burger places have opened up, dessert parlours, and a lot of young people want a burger because when you're at home, you want something different to what your parents serve up. But as I wanted something different to the lamb chops and boiled potatoes my parents served up, hence my love for curries. The Balti Triangle, I think, was in the Rough Guide's top 40 things to do before you die. I think we're about equal with the pyramids, so say no more on that. So yeah, it's an important thing for Birmingham, but it's only important if we safeguard the authentic restaurants.
Despite the Balti Triangle not being quite as Balti as before, this staple Birmingham dish isn't going anywhere just yet. Jack Carson, GB News.
But from 30 restaurants down to 4, worrying times. Let us know your views on curries, Baltis, and from that From the end of the curry, the possible end of the curry, to the end of veganism.
Yes, vegan businesses based in Leeds have gone into administration this week, putting 50 of its employees out of work in the process.
Now, it's called Meatless Farm, set up in 2016, but has struggled to trade with the popularity of plant-based products slowing down.
So we're asking this morning, is the age of the vegan finally over? We're joined by hairdresser and vegan Kelly Vowles. She thinks that people attack veganism because they're scared of it.
Meanwhile, gut health nutritionist Rhys Mander, who believes you can't function just on plants alone. Good morning to both of you. Kelly, could you sort of outline to me and outline to our viewers and listeners exactly what veganism is?
Yeah, of course. So veganism, effectively, I think people compare it a lot to the food that they eat, but essentially it's actually a whole lifestyle choice. People go vegan for the planet, for their health, for the animals. But what we're trying to do is exclude any animal harm from our lifestyles, which means in our food, in our cosmetics, in the lifestyle that we lead. And of course, primarily that does include meat, dairy, effectively, things like that.
Could I say, I would find it very hard to practice, but I totally respect you, particularly from the animal point of view. And it's something I struggle with myself, and I just don't think I'm strong enough to do it, or I'm just too weak to do it. But I respect where you're coming from. However, Rhys, my friend, when we've talked about this before, you would think that maybe Kelly's whole health may be at risk because of all of this. Now, we should say Rhys is a gut health nutritionist and a personal trainer as well.
Correct, yeah. I think that the ideology behind looking after the animals is great, but when you look at the number of pesticides you spray on crops, vegetables, you're killing a lot of animals. They're just small ones. So you're talking about larger animals and protecting cows and things like that, but what about the insects? That when you grow the same crop over and over and over again, you damage all the little small animals.
Have you ever thought of that?
Well, of course we've thought about it. As vegans, we hear these arguments all the time. They're thrown at us all the time in a defence mechanism. I don't know what crops you think that the animals are eating, but they are going to be eating the same ones. So if all of a sudden you're telling me you're an insect activist, then you're still kind of having that kind of issue because the cows, livestock are going to be eating crops as well. But it also takes way more crop, it takes way more plants to feed and keep alive livestock than it would if we as humans just went directly to the food source ourselves.
It's an incredibly strict way of life, isn't it? And, you can understand why, as Eamonn says, some of people will sort of commit to that. But because of its strictness, all these businesses suddenly popped up with making life easier for you guys. Yeah. Do you think that the fact that we've seen this business going into administration, is this a sign that people just can't maintain that level of commitment, or perhaps that the market is saturated?
I would say it's more because the market has become more competitive. Not for one second do I think that this really sad closure has come because people don't want to be vegan anymore. Meatless Farm, they're a fantastic meat substitute, and what the reading that I have been doing on this is actually a lot of the quotes have been saying people haven't been buying meat substitutes as much. What we're forgetting is there are way more other foods which are vegan, like beans, pulses, baked beans, salad, all the things that a lot of meat eaters actually already include in their diets, minus the animal.
Rhys, can that be true? Can you run your body effectively on plants alone?
Not optimally, no. There's too many things that you miss out on eating plants only. There's too many nutrients that are not as bioavailable in plants as they are in animals, so it's much harder to get the required level of minerals just eating plants than you would if you were adding animals.
Even if you have supplements?
Even if you have supplements, because again, we spoke about this before. How much do you take? How much do you need? Are you absorbing it? There's lots of supplements on the market. Not all of them are very good. In fact, most of them, I would say, are poor quality. So it's just a lot more difficult.
Aye. What would your meat intake be in a week or a month or whatever? What quantity of meat would you eat?
Me personally, because I weight train, 4 or 5 times a week, I eat a fair amount of meat every day, especially red meat. But I get varied protein sources. So I eat chicken, I eat fish, I eat beef, I eat lamb.
Is there certain meat that's better than other? White meat better than red meat? Or, for instance, my friend, if you go into a supermarket and you have a packet of bacon or you've cooked ham or compressed chicken or whatever it is, is that's completely processed, is that worse for you than, barbecuing a whole chicken or frying a steak or something?
Yeah, so there's a sliding scale, right? And you want to effectively buy the best quality meat you can afford. And I would say that if it's grass-fed, it's able to roam around outside and eat more natural things, that would be better for you. And a steak would be much better for you than the processed meat you were talking about. And I think that's where a lot of confusion comes from. People lump processed meats in with red meat, but not all red meat is processed.
But Kelly, I mean, how do you explain what is happening in Leeds to this vegan company and the dip in demand for product?
It's not a dip in demand for product. In fact, I think this has come as an escalated demand for product. What we've seen in the last couple of years is a massive growth in supermarket-owned brands. So I know that I shop in my local budget supermarket because their vegan meat-free range has grown massively. So it's a lot cheaper for us as a family to buy that. And unfortunately, that does mean there are going to be more premium brands becoming a casualty of that.
And can you, just finally, Kelly, can you ease yourself on to veganism, even though Reece wouldn't agree? But, I mean, are there degrees? I mean, have you to go total vegan straight away, or can you get there bit by bit?
It's either way. I actually started my journey as a vegetarian and then saw some things about the egg industry that really made me uncomfortable, and that's how I turned vegan. However, my husband just decided overnight, and that's it. He's been vegan for 6 years. I've been vegan for 8. But
I must say, you look healthy enough.
Well, I was going to touch on something that Reece said, actually, because I weight train 4 times a week and I'm also a boxer. So here I am living and existing without the chicken.
But I'd just say that just because you look healthy doesn't mean you're healthy on the inside. And it generally takes a while for people's store of minerals to get depleted enough for them not to feel great. And then it's really tricky because you start to feel tired, you start to feel unwell, but a lot of people don't put it down to the fact that they're not getting enough minerals from the plants that they're eating.
Wow.
Well, guys, thank you very much.
Agree to disagree. Kelly, Vals, Reece, Manda, thank you both for coming in bright and early.
And have
to
you
debate
converted in recent times, from eating meat to being vegetarian or being vegan? Going the whole hog to being vegan. Let us know. GBViews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Now we have some breaking news for you. The Prime Minister has been up and about early this morning, and he has been out with the Home Office on a raid, and he's been speaking to us about it. He was trying to help and observe the raid on illegal migrants. Let's have a listen in.
This morning, the immigration backlog is something that your Home Secretary was talking about yesterday. You have this target to abolish it by the end of the year. She was suggesting that you may not meet it at the current rate. Are you worried about that?
Well, it's good to be out this morning with our immigration enforcement team, seeing firsthand their work to tackle illegal working. That's an important strand of our work to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration. And that's because the criminal gangs use a business model that tempts people here with the offer of black market work. It's not right, which is why we've increased resources for immigration enforcement. We've increased the number of raids, like the one I was on this morning, by 50%, and we've doubled the number of arrests. But we're not complacent. There's lots of work to do, which is why it's so important that we pass our bill through Parliament, our Stop the Boats bill, which will mean that if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. We'll be able to detain you and then swiftly remove you.
Prime Minister, we're expecting the Privileges Committee report to be published later today. Will MPs get a vote on the findings to actually accept the recommendations from the committee?
Well, I can't speculate. Obviously, I haven't seen the report yet, but these are typically matters for the House, not the government, and it's the House of Commons and Parliament that would decide the appropriate course of action.
On a personal level, do you think Boris Johnson should be allowed to be an MP? We know that the report has found that he misled Parliament.
You're talking about a report that I haven't seen and no one else has seen. It wouldn't be right to comment on it in advance of it coming out and being published.
We've heard enough about it. Boris Johnson has stepped down because we know what the report has said. If you're not willing to talk about it now, are you willing to do an interview with us after the report comes out, once you had a chance to read it?
As you say, you're talking about a report that I haven't seen, no one has seen yet. It wouldn't be right to comment on it before that's happened. And these are matters for the House of Commons, and Parliament will deal with them in the normal way that it does.
I appreciate you don't want to talk about it now, but the report's coming out in a few hours' time. We know exactly what it's going to say. You're the Prime Minister, you're the leader of the Conservative Party. We've been talking about it for weeks. Are you willing to do an interview with us once the report is out, once you've had a chance to read it, and digest it?
I said, you know about a report that I haven't even seen yet, so it's hard for me to comment on it, but will you
talk to us once you've had a chance to read it?
Well, what we are doing is having an interview now talking about tackling illegal migration. I set out 5 priorities at the beginning of this year: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and to stop the boats. I think that's what the country wants me and the government to be focused on. That's what we are focused on. That's why I was out this morning seeing firsthand the work of our illegal migration enforcement teams, the great work that they are doing. That's why we've doubled the number of arrests this year, and that's why for the first time since the small boats crisis emerged, the numbers of illegal crossings are actually down this year. That shows that our plan is working, but there's still more to do, so we're going to keep at it, and I think that's what the country would expect me to be focused on.
Have you been frustrated by Boris Johnson's recent interventions in the last week or so?
No, I'm just getting on with delivering for the country. At the beginning of the year, I set out 5 very clear priorities: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting list, and to stop the boats. That's what I'm relentlessly focusing on. This morning I've been out with our teams who are tackling illegal working. That's part of our plan to tackle illegal migration and to stop the boats. They're doing a great job. Our plan is starting to work. For the first time since the small boats phenomenon emerged, numbers of crossings are down this year, so that should give us some signs for confidence and positivity, but there's lots more work to do. We're not complacent. That's why we're going to pass our new bill through Parliament to ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be swiftly detained, you will not be able to stay, and we will be able to remove you.
As Prime Minister and Party Leader, are you worried about the impact this is having, the discussions about you and Boris Johnson, the talk of him misleading Parliament, the report that's coming out today? Are you worried about what people at home are thinking?
I think what people at home want is for the government to focus on their priorities, and that's what I'm doing. I set out 5 very clear priorities at the beginning of this year: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and to stop the boats. I'm confident that that's what the country wants government to deliver. That's the country's priorities. Those are my priorities. This morning I've been out with our teams who are tackling illegal working, and the enforcement operations that we've put in place are working. We've doubled the number of arrests this year, increased the number of raids by 50%, and for the first time since the small boats phenomenon emerged, the number of crossings are actually down this year. That shows us that our plan is working, but we're not complacent. There's lots more to do, and that's why we're going to crack on and pass our new bill through Parliament, which will mean that if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. We will be able to detain you and remove you. That's the right response to this crisis. That's what the government is doing.
And last question, Prime Minister, I'm going to ask you that question again. The privileges report comes out in a matter of hours. You've not answered my questions because you haven't had a chance to read it. Will you do an interview with us later today once you've had a chance to look through that report?
I do interviews all the time, but again, you're asking about a report that I haven't seen, and I can't comment on it in advance of it being published.
Thank you very much. Great, cheers, thank you.
Dressed up in his police officer's uniform there, ready to kick down a few doors today, and that guy just asks him about a parliamentary committee over and over again. But as Rishi points out, they're getting to Calais and they're saying, well, I'm not crossing in that boat because you never know, Rishi could come knocking on the door and turf us all out again. So what did you make of what you've just saw and heard there? I don't think, Isabel, that worked out the way the Prime Minister planned.
Look, this is pretty standard in the political pool, isn't it? That it's just both of them not deviating from their job. The reporter was told, go out and get a line on the infighting and the Tories. The Prime Minister was told or decided, I'm going out on a raid, and both of them were absolutely adamant. But I think what the reporter was trying to do there was to try and get the Prime Minister to get fed up and say something about Boris, which he was resolutely not doing.
I got fed up looking at it, listening to
but listen, let us know.
Stuff over again.
It's unusual to see the Prime Minister out and about on these sorts of raids.
Yes, but does it make a difference to your perception of how we as a country are tackling illegal migration? Do you look and say, the Prime Minister's right on top of this, the fact he's all dressed up and he's got his stab jacket on and whatever, and looks, he must know what's going on there? Or is that a PR stunt gone wrong today? Let us know what you think.
And stay with us. We'll tell you why the head of the army is considering scrapping ranks like riflemen and guardsmen as they're too masculine. Going through the papers, Freddie Gray, Stephanie Tecci, now.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Papers, read all about it now in the company of Freddie Gray and Stephanie Tetchy, and there's not a lot of good reading around in the papers. But Freddie, let's begin with Boris Johnson Gate, and we're going to respect, as this report is published sometime after 9 o'clock this morning, more Boris reaction. What's The Guardian saying?
Well, The Guardian has gone with desperate Johnson hits out at Tory MPs, which tells you a bit about what The Guardian think of Boris Johnson. Obviously, there's some manoeuvring going on here with Boris Johnson, but I think it's a significant and interesting and, from a journalistic point of view, quite delicious story that Bernard Jenkins, who's on the committee, the Privilege Committee, investigating a breach of Partygate, he denies it, but he seems to have attended a party that probably was in breach of Tier 2 lockdown regulations. And someone's taking great delight. It's great. I mean, it is a great story. If you're on the committee investigating this and you haven't declared that you yourself, it's not great.
No. Just seeing pictures just come into us there of Boris Johnson this morning on his morning run. You always enjoy admiring what he's wearing, don't you, Eamonn?
Yes. You've seen how it's all totally coordinated. Let's see if he's coordinated today.
We've got Rishi in the stab vest, and then we've got
Boris
Johnson
his black socks.
Calculated messiness.
Oh, here he is. Calculated messiness. Do you think it is calculated?
Look at those
Hawaiian shorts.
Black socks.
I mean, people say he always ruffles his hair up before before the interviews. But
his hairdresser got an MBE.
He does have a strange running technique, doesn't
He
he?
does. Flailing left arm.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, bless him. There's a sweet little village and loads of paps there as well. But you're right. There is a deliciousness in terms of, the newspapers are loving this story. Does it look? Is it a good look? I mean, is it that edifying? Yes. If this is found to have been a breach, that's not what this is all about. This is about misleading Parliament. We know parties went on. We know rules were broken. I mean, take him off the committee, they'd still have found the same.
I think it is delicious because I think everybody who looks at this from an objective point of view, and most people do, I think it's revolting that the people in government, including Boris Johnson, were not taking the rules that they'd imposed on everyone so seriously. At the same time, this investigations committee is a kangaroo court. It's been called a kangaroo court, and rightly so. There's no way was it ever going to be objected, led as it is by Harriet Harman.
So do committees like this have a future, Freddie? I mean, now that we've highlighted this and a lot of people are saying, there is a tinge of kangaroo about all of this, do they have a future?
I think it's going to get worse and worse, and I think what you're seeing increasingly in Western countries is, aside from democracy, you have lawfare happening, and this connects to it. Partygate connects to it. You have Donald Trump being investigated on many fronts. You have Nicola Sturgeon. You have Boris Johnson. You have Silvio Berlusconi, who recently died, who spent all of his post-prime ministerial career being investigated. And it's becoming I interviewed an Argentinian film director yesterday, and he was talking about this, and he said, you're all becoming Latin America. This is what we do. We lock up leaders afterwards. We prosecute them legally.
I don't know if I accept that. I mean, when you call it a kangaroo court, I mean, we haven't even seen the report, OK? And this was based on evidence that they've compiled and looked at over a long period of time. Now, you're questioning the objectivity of the people involved, but the findings anybody can read, and then that's going to go to a vote in Parliament on Monday. So this is as democratic.
It's upholding the rule of law, sort of, but it's wildly inconsistent. I mean, the thing that will get him expelled is lying to Parliament.
Yes.
Which he probably did. But do we not think Tony Blair lied to Parliament in the build-up to the Iraq War? Was he ever investigated?
Well, I mean, yeah, he's never been forgiven for it either.
He's never been forgiven, yeah, but he was never expelled from Parliament as a result of it.
Was he still in Parliament when people were making that?
There was an inquiry into it, and it was fudged,
sort of
essentially.
After his time.
And that's what investigations used to do, is they used to fudge.
From one parliamentary inquiry to another, the heads of ITV were called in front of a parliamentary committee, and they have been for a few days now. It was the boss woman yesterday.
Yep.
How did she do?
Dame Caroline McCall and Kevin Nigo. It was showtime for them and crunch time. I think a lot of people have been waiting to hear what they've got to say in terms of how this Philip Schofield affair was handled by ITV. There's been such concerns about duty of care for this young runner. Also, how much did these ITV executive bosses know about the situation? They're still standing by their story where they say that Philip Schofield lied to us. We were very much in the dark. Dame Caroline McCall said it was never formally investigated, but she does admit that both of them were quizzed dozens of times. For me, I think, how can you be questioning him, both these people, over 12 times? There must have been some evidence there that you guys have missed, or there must have been some reason.
Well, I'd just like to see the documentary evidence and what the quiz was, what the questions were with this. I'm surprised that wasn't asked for, because my understanding of it is, are you both happy? Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that's it. So that's why she's trying to cover herself, saying it wasn't actually a formal investigation. They've said that Philip Schofield has now been provided with counselling because she is concerned about his welfare. We've seen the interviews that he's done with BBC where he said he's felt suicidal. So I think they are trying to make themselves look like they do still care about Philip Schofield. They've denied that there's been any toxic culture at ITV. Eamonn, they have mentioned you in some of the reports as well.
They can mention anything they want because they've got parliamentary privilege, so they can say anything they want about me and I can't sue or whatever. But brave words, I know what I know. They don't seem to know a lot. And the unfortunately mentioned named man Kevin Ligo just doesn't come up you know, as an appropriate name in such an inquiry. But there we go. Make it that one.
Have we got time for one more before we...
But you see, the thing about all of these, people take sides on these things. You know, that's what they do. They take sides, whether it's the Boris business, whether it's the Philip Schofield business or whatever. And there's that great scene in the film A Few Good Men where Jack Nicholson says, or is it Jack Nicholson or Tom Cruise says, the truth... You can't handle the truth. People can't handle the truth.
No, the truth is pretty hard to handle.
If it's not their version.
But what is the truth?
Well, I know the truth.
Steph, Freddie, thank you both. We'll have more from them after 8:30. Now, households have been burdened with 3 million faulty smart meters in a botched rollout that's ballooning over budget, according to a new report.
Now, this comes as the Net Zero scheme, which was supposed to have been seen a smart meter installed in your house, in every home in the country, is now forecast to cost more than £13.5 billion. How smart is that? Let's find out more from consumer champion Will Hodson on this one. Will, so it's not going well?
Morning, Eamonn. No, it's not going great. Bear in mind that in 2011, when this rollout was conceived, the idea was that we were going to have a smart meter in every home by 2020. In fact, I was there on the launch event where no less than Sir Bob Geldof was talking about the importance of smart meters. And I have to say, nearly 15 years on, I remain convinced of the importance and the utility of the technology, but slightly exasperated at the shortfall of this botched smart meter rollout. We've only got 57% of meters in the UK currently functioning as smart meters. And of that 57%, that's 32 million meters, 3 million of those meters don't even work as smart meters. That is a disgrace.
So they're still working as meters, but they don't actually tell you how you can curb your usage. I mean, is there any evidence that people do curb their evidence when they are installed and working properly? And I'm asking, as someone who has a smart meter, and I see it go to red whenever I put the toaster on, and I feel terrible guilt, but I still want my toast. So in many ways, I try not to look at it.
Well, over the course of a year, Isabel, all those little pangs of guilt and those slices of toast and maybe slices of toast that have to be gone without add up to energy efficiency savings. So this was one glimmer of hope in the report that came out from the National Audit Office about the smart meter rollout. They found, with solid data behind them, the savings you get from smart meters actually higher than they had originally thought. They had thought it would be about 2%. Now, on an average bill, £2,500 a year under the energy price guarantee, that 2% is 50 quid a year, not nothing. What they've found is it's more like 3 to 3.5%. So you're pushing up to £60, £70 per year for the average household. In addition, I should add, if you have a smart meter, some of our viewers may be remembering discussions around blackouts we had over the winter. Smart meters were brought into play. If you had a smart meter and you were willing to use your usage, or shift your usage, I should say, away from peak hours, you were going to be paid by your energy supplier for doing so. Over the course of a year, you might save £75 by doing that, but only if you've got a functioning smart meter which proves you shifted your usage away from those peak hours. So £75 there, about £60 to £70 on energy efficiency savings. Smart meters can save you £140 or so per year, which is why it's important we get this rollout right.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh. Well, I mean, what are the chances that they will get it right? I mean, are they going to plough ahead even at that cost, or do you think, they need to have a rethink?
It's an eye-watering cost, but don't forget that smart meters are going to save the public about 50% more than it's going to cost for the country to roll it out. So the original estimates were about 13 billion to roll it out, but about 20 billion in savings. With energy prices going through the roof, which we've discussed many times on the show, the savings are going to be far higher than 20 billion. So just because it's a high installation cost, it doesn't mean we should give up. The savings will be bigger, and the savings belong to us. The costs belong to the suppliers and government. But therein lies the problem, a little bit of smart meter rollout history. You had a couple of choices about who you could entrust with the rollout of smart meters. You could go with the DNOs, who are engineers by trade, or you could go with the energy suppliers. Most people expected it was going to go with the DNOs. These guys put in the meters 20, 30 years ago. Ofgem at the time became obsessed with this idea that competition was what we wanted. And where we had competition was with suppliers. So therefore, suppliers should be in charge of rolling out those smart meters. Now, common sense says smart meters in the hands of suppliers who don't want you to use this energy and aren't experts in installing meters was always going to be going a little bit wrong, which is why we're hearing these mealy-mouthed excuses from suppliers saying, look, we've done all the low-hanging fruit, we've done our best, but we can't get them into it. Sorry.
Interesting thoughts there. Good conspiracy theory. Let us know your views. Have you experienced this or not? Does your smart meter work or not? Will Hodgson, thank you for your time this morning. Will is a consumer champion from How to Save It.
Stay with us. We'll have more from Nottingham after your forecast.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's another stunning day today, sunshine and very warm once again for many of us, but an increased chance of some serious thunderstorms for some later in the day. For the time being, high pressure in charge, that's to the north of the UK. Still an easterly airflow, keeping things cooler on the east coast, but inland widely temperatures will quickly rise through the morning with the wall-to-wall sunshine. As temperatures rise, there's likely to be a bit more cloud development, I think, especially towards southern and southwestern parts compared with Wednesday. But actually, for most, it's a fine day to come. Odd shower possible across North Wales as the temperatures rise, and they will rise once again into the mid to high 20s, widely above average for the time of year, but a bit more limited there for the east coast of England. Into the evening, however, some serious thunderstorms are likely to get going across Ireland, and they're most likely to drift north into parts of Northern Ireland, especially western parts. And where these hit, we could see some frequent lightning, large hail, torrential rain. Could be some impacts from those storms, but they'll be very localised. Otherwise, it's largely dry overnight, clear spells, but temperatures remaining at 15, 16 Celsius across parts of the south. So a muggy night for sleeping, but a widely sunny start once again. On Friday, any thunderstorms across Ireland move away for the time being, but they develop once again into Friday afternoon and more likely to hit parts of Northern Ireland into the afternoon and evening, whilst other storms could develop across northwest England, southwest Scotland, parts of Wales as well. Once again, these will be very localised, but where they occur, they're going to be pretty lively. More widely, thunderstorms and showers will develop across western and southwestern parts on Saturday and then across the rest of the UK generally into Sunday, and at the same time it will turn a bit cooler.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important.
Heartbreaking words there from the father of Grace O'Malley Kumar as he addressed a vigil for the victims of the Nottingham attacks.
Very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. It's just after 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 15th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning, the grieving families of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar came together in Nottingham last night for a vigil attended by thousands of mourners. Yesterday, the third victim was named as 65-year-old school caretaker Ian Coates.
In Nottingham city centre, on the surface at least, things have returned to normal. But people here still have that burning question: what on earth sparked this murderous rampage in the early hours of Tuesday morning?
Boris Johnson has called for a Conservative MP on the Privileges Committee to resign just hours before it publishes its report into whether he misled Parliament. The former PM called allegations that Sir Bernard Jenkins broke COVID rules a total contempt of Parliament.
The Prime Minister addresses the illegal migrant crisis. He's saying his Stop the Boats message is working.
That's an important strand of our work to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration, and that's because the criminal gangs use a business model that tempts people here with the offer of black market work.
And the Premier League's next season's fixtures are hours away from being announced, and Paul Coit will be here with all the latest.
Yeah, they've been arranged as we speak. It comes out in 1 hour, but the Ashes begins tomorrow. But what are the Ashes, I hear you ask? I don't hear you ask.
I know what they are.
Are they something to do with ashes, I wonder?
The what?
Are they something to do with ashes, perhaps?
No, they're the stumps and the little things that go between the stumps. What are they called?
The bales.
The bales.
Not necessarily true, no.
Really?
We will be finding
What else
out.
could they
I'll
be?
tell you, I'll tell you.
Okay, right, okay. Look for it at 20 past.
I will, at 20 past.
Right, okay, excellent.
And as the Met Office issues new weather warnings, we'll have your latest forecast.
Another very warm day today for most of us, but it's all about to go bang. Find out more in the weather forecast with me, Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office.
Sad times over the country and in Nottingham in particular. It's preparing for another vigil today after the totally devastated families of the two murdered 19-year-old students were joined by thousands of people at the university's main campus last night.
Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar were victims of the knife and van attacks in Nottingham on Tuesday.
David Webber and Sanjoy Kumar, the fathers of those teenagers, said both their hearts will remain in the city forever.
I'm lost for words. I've lost my baby boy, and I can't even comprehend how I'm going to deal with it.
Look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important. I think Grace and her friend, they fell together. And you need to be friends with everyone, and you need to love everyone. And I wish we had more of it.
Absolutely heartbreaking scenes there, and such incredible courage to speak like that. We're going to get an update now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White. It's been 2 days now since that attack. They very quickly arrested someone, and yet we understand the suspect simply not cooperating.
No, and with a very serious offence, someone can be held for up to 96 hours before they then have to be charged or released. But yes, the indications certainly were that this individual was not cooperating, and that just makes it that much more difficult, of course, for the police to try to get an idea of what exactly the motivation was behind these attacks. We know that counter-terrorism police are still involved in the investigation. The Home Secretary confirming that yesterday. They have not ruled out terrorism, but nothing yet indicating that the motivation was terrorism. It's been reported in some of the papers today that this 31-year-old suspect last year did knock on the door of the headquarters of the security service, MI5, down in London. He was not allowed in. His details were taken, and sort of no more was thought of it in that sense. But why was knocking on the door of MI5, we don't know. But as I say, all of that will factor into the ongoing investigation. Just in the last hour, I spoke to Arslan Aftab, a local security guard for a car park just nearby, who witnessed the events here in Milton Street after 3 members of the public were run over by the stolen van, stolen from that 65-year-old victim, Ian Coates. This is what Mr. Aftab told us.
Police came, they wanted to obviously close the car park. They didn't want anyone in and out. They didn't want anyone going across the road or anything. They were just investigating. And then when I came on the shift, they were still investigating about 7, half 7. It's hard times. You wouldn't expect this in Nottingham, because I've been living here all my life. I've never witnessed something like that. And, you know, I don't know what the world's gone up to. You know, people's mentalities have changed. Why would you do that? Like, I mean, if it's like you're killing like 3 people, you know, but humanity is not like that. Humanity is about peace. You know, we should think about peace, about each other, and you know, it's hard times.
So more than 2 days on, people still clearly shocked by those events, and they have that burning question as to what on earth was the motivation for such a murderous attack. The police don't know that yet, but what they are saying is that they believe that this was an isolated incident, that they don't believe there are any other individuals out there who may have had knowledge of what was being planned, or indeed may be planning something similar themselves.
OK, Mark, thank you very much.
Boris Johnson's called for a Conservative MP on the Privileges Committee to resign just hours before it publishes its report into whether he misled Parliament.
The former PM said it was a total contempt of Parliament, referring to allegations that Sir Bernard Jenkin attended a birthday drinks in Parliament whilst COVID restrictions were in place.
Well, here in the studio, our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Why has this taken so long to get out? And the fact that Where does it seem to have taken place? In one of the bars in Parliament buildings?
In an office on the parliamentary estate, the office of Dame Eleanor Lang, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. This allegation, which Bernard Jenkin has stayed rather silent about since a partial transcript of a conversation he had with the Guido Fawkes website was published on that website yesterday, sort of alluding to the fact that perhaps he was equivocating on whether he was there or not. But this was a birthday party allegedly for his wife, then wife, that was hosted whilst certainly London was in a Tier 2 state of lockdown when indoor mixing was prohibited. It does seem like there was some sort of event in the office of Dame Eleanor Lang, and the allegations are that did not include social distancing. It was certainly not a work gathering, and it included alcohol and cake.
So, Tom, this will add to the frustration that so many people feel that people in Westminster weren't following the rules when many of us were. Perhaps their view may be that it just shows how ridiculous the rules were altogether. But I suppose it doesn't get to the heart of what the report is finding today. We know parties happened, and yes, it's important who was on that committee and whether he's involved. But what we're trying to find out today is whether the Prime Minister at the time lied at the dispatch box.
Well, this is a crucial question because the terms of reference of this committee are slightly different from that of previous iterations of finding out whether someone knowingly misled the House. The term of reference of this committee isn't knowingly misled in the same way that these sort of investigations have run in the past. It's recklessly misled. Therefore, it's a lower bar to prove. So, for example, Boris Johnson's defence is he said what he believed to be true at the time at the dispatch box. He said no parties happened because that's what he was assured by his civil servants. That's been his argument throughout. What the committee, therefore, is trying to do is to say, well, you were reckless in that statement rather than knowingly misleading in that statement. And that's a lower bar to reach a sort of sanction. But the reason why this has all been delayed so much is at the 11th hour, just a couple of days ago, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson submitted some last-minute representations to the committee. Now, I understand that is going to be a sort of addendum to the end of this 30,000-word report with a response to the committee underneath it, but it's not going to change the bulk of the report, which we're expecting in less than an hour's time.
And what will happen with that? Will we be emailed? Will you see an email? Is it going to go on a government website? I mean, what's the sort of choreography? Well, I know you'll be here at 9 breaking this for us live.
This is a parliamentary investigation rather than a government investigation, so it's not going to go on the government website. We will be emailed it, but around the same time, the public will be able to see it on the Privileges Committee section of the parliamentary website. They publish all of their publications there, and we're expecting it very shortly after 9 a.m.
The Prime Minister today expected to change the narrative by dressing up in a police uniform, basically, and knocking on illegal immigrant doors. It all went horribly wrong, in my view. I'm not a great fan of politicians dressing up in army gear and helmets and all sorts of things. But he had a stab jacket on and a white shirt, and basically the reporter, it was a pull interview, it wasn't a GB News reporter asking the questions, but the reporter stuck to his line, which was, how's he going to react to this report when it's published this morning? And that wasn't what Rishi Sunak really wanted. How do you think that will play out? Do you think this backfired for him today?
Well, we often see this in pooled interviews where the politician being interviewed, and it's not just the Prime Minister, it's many different party leaders as well, they will have one thing they want to say, and almost no matter the question asked of them, they will say their pre-prepared line. Yes. And I think that's what we saw this morning. I believe we've got a clip of that interview from the Prime Minister now.
Right, let's have a look.
That's an important strand of our work to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration, and that's because the criminal gangs use a business model that tempts people here with the offer of black market work. It's not right, which is why we've increased resources for immigration enforcement. We've increased the number of raids, like the one I was on this morning, by 50%, and we've doubled the number of arrests. But we're not complacent. There's lots of work to do, which is why it's so important that we pass our bill through Parliament.
Didn't hear any of the questions there, but you get the sense, really, if that was what he wanted to talk about, even though he was being asked repeatedly about Boris Johnson. Do you think that will move the dial on, or do you think it's a sort of a vain attempt from the Prime Minister today?
The remarkable thing about Boris Johnson is he is a magnet for news, and no matter how much the government tries to escape the shadow of Boris Johnson, I believe the news agenda throughout today will be looking at not just the Privileges Committee report, which we're expecting at 9, but I understand as well we'll get a response from Boris Johnson very, very shortly, almost concurrently with the publish of that.
Well, you go keep your eye on that and bring it to us as soon as you get it. Thanks very much indeed, Tom Harwood. Now the Associate Editor of the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope, with his take on things. How do you think it's going to play out today, Christopher?
It's been a long wait, Eamonn, hasn't it? I mean, there's a 30,000-word report dropping at 9 a.m., then a debate on Monday and probably a vote on Monday. And it's all about whether it's a free vote, which MPs might rally to support Boris Johnson. This feels like they're going to flame out, I think, of Boris Johnson's political career, certainly for now. It's going to probably say that he misled the House of Commons. That's what we think, given the Johnson reaction and given the claims he's been saying since. And he, of course, has seen a draft copy of the report last Thursday and then spectacularly resigned last Friday. So I'm not sure how much is bothering actual constituents. I think I've spoken to half a dozen Tory MPs. They say they've had a very few number of emails in protesting about the treatment of Johnson. So I wonder whether it's obviously entertaining, to be frank, and a kind of spectacular fall from power for Boris Johnson, but whether it actually affects the kind of mortgage rates, interest rates, cost of living, those are the big issues worrying people nowadays.
I spotted your tweets yesterday about the kangaroo court argument that surrounding this whole Privileges Committee, and the Labour members of the committee, I understand, wanted disciplinary action against anybody who used that term because it put the Commons in contempt. But they managed to come to a sort of agreement with the Conservative members that it would be the Privy Councillors only that could possibly be disciplined. So the likes of, say, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Tell us more about all of this.
Well, that's right. A big concern has been the way supporters of Boris Johnson have called this committee, 7-strong committee, 4 Tory MPs, 3 from the opposition. They've called it a kangaroo court. That expression was first actually reported by me for Telegraph in May last year. It came from a source in the government saying it was going to be a kangaroo court. And so it's proved for those supporters of Boris Johnson. The idea is they are so annoyed, really annoyed, I think, about they see Tory MPs and really Tory MPs who should know better attacking an attempt by MPs to discipline other MPs in Parliament. Jacob Rees-Mogg's in the firing line. If you're a Privy Councillor, it means you are basically you've sat in the cabinet. You're a very senior Tory, a very senior MP. You've been given access to state secrets. The idea is that's a different calibre of MP to more junior MPs. So the idea of going after Privy Councillors in this report at 9 o'clock, we think, and we don't know if it kind of got through into the final draft. If it is in there, it could be further drama next week when Johnson, of course, has a vote on him and a discussion about him whether he should be banned from the House of Commons for the rest of this Parliament or whatever it might be. But equally, there might be some attempt to try and censure people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, and that might create martyrs on the backbenches of the Tory party, people who want to back Boris Johnson, then they're told they can't by the powers that be. It's a kind of small version of the kind of Trumpian way politics is carried out nowadays.
One more question quickly before we let you go about Nadine Dorries, because she obviously had said she was going to resign on Friday, doesn't appear to have gone through with it. What do you think's going on there?
Well, she gave a lengthy Twitter thread last night to explain she's quite keen to stay as an MP. She's done what are called subject access requests, which means you can apply to any institution and ask for mentions of your name. She's hoping to find out what happened to her peerage. Of course, Boris Johnson promised her a peerage in his resignation honours list. It turned out with a conversation with the Chief Whip on Friday last week that she wasn't going to get it. She then resigned as an MP at 4 p.m. last Friday. Seems like years ago, it was last Friday she resigned. I say resigned, she's told people she's resigning. She hasn't formally resigned. She hasn't written a letter yet to the Treasury say, I resign as an MP. That means she's in a kind of purgatory, I suppose you might describe it. She's waiting to go, and people think she wants to stay as an MP, maybe to use parliamentary privilege to make some claims about people who brought down Boris Johnson. She's writing a book about it, about the alleged plot that saw the end of Johnson. So we'll wait and see. It's not over. I mean, it does feel like it should end soon with by-elections next month, probably the June the 20th, in 2 of the 3 seats at Selby and South Ruislip and Uxbridge, but we're not there yet. I'm sorry about this. We're going to carry on.
Finally, Christopher, do you think the Prime Minister has over-egged his immigration message? Do you think that may have backfired a bit on him today or not?
No, I think there's definitely an intention in Downing Street to show the PM is doing what he can to deliver on these 5 targets he set himself this year, one of which is quotes, to stop the boats. Now, that's a target he set himself. He's not going to do it this year, but he wants to try and show progress by the time of the next election, which could be in May or October next year. So I think they're desperate to show him out on the front foot, doing things to deliver for Tory voters, for the people of the country, to try and deliver on this promise he made to us all in January. And they want to show this Boris saga as a sideshow away from the real world, a Westminster bubble idea, if you like.
Christopher Hope, Associate Editor of the Daily Telegraph. Thank you very much indeed.
It's 8:19. Let's bring you up to date now with the rest of today's top stories.
A 34-year-old man has died on railway tracks in South London after being chased by police. The Met Police say officers began pursuing a car after it failed to stop in the early hours of Wednesday morning. They lost sight of the driver and he's believed to have climbed a fence on the railway line before being pronounced dead at the scene.
Junior doctors in England are continuing their 72-hour strike action today. Figures show that more than 500,000 appointments and procedures have been postponed due to industrial action since December.
Campaigners are calling on the government to extend paid paternity leave from 2 to 6 weeks after research found it could reduce the gender pay gap. Britain has the least generous paternity leave entitlement in Europe, with a statutory 2 weeks and pay of £172 a week.
Stay with us ahead of the 9 a.m. announcement of this year's Premier League fixtures. We'll have all the details with Paul Coit.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 8:24, still to come on today's programme.
Taking place this weekend, the first trooping of the colour without the Queen. We'll find out what's being planned. 8:45, Kinsey Schofield, not live from LA, live from London, here in the studio.
And we'll bring you all the details of the Privileges Committee report into Boris Johnson amid predictions it will be released around 9 o'clock.
Thanks very much indeed for getting in touch this morning. So many reactions to so many different stories. The story about Elaine Lynch, such a sad and scandalous story on those poor ladies facing cancer. Perhaps some of the millions wasted by the NHS on diversity training and make-believe jobs, let alone gender-pandering nonsense, could be used to obtain treatments. GB Views at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News. The back pages shape up like this on this Thursday morning. The Mail. I'll smash the Aussies. England wonder kid Harry Brook has promised to fight the fire off the Australian paceman with some fire of his own in the Ashes. In the Express, Arsenal exploring a shock move for Chelsea forward Kai Havertz as they look to renew themselves ahead of another Premier League title race. Jude's a real superstar in the Metro. Real Madrid signed the England midfielder a deal worth $88.5 million, rising perhaps to 115 depending. The esteemed sports broadcaster Paul Coyte joins us now with the... Do you like how I'm building?
I really like it, yeah.
Yeah. So the Ashes, tell us, why are the Ashes named the Ashes?
The Ashes are named the Ashes. It was written, actually, I believe this to be in the Times. So this is back in 1882, after England lost the series against Australia. It was the first time that England had lost in England against Australia. And it was an esteemed writer, there was a proper esteemed writer, that wrote about the matches, and he said that England cricket is dead, and that the body will be cremated, and because they all spoke like that in those days, the body will be cremated and the ashes taken to Australia. Okay. So they have so then the Ashes came afterwards. You mentioned the bale, yes. And that's what it is believed to be, is the top of one of the bales of the stumps.
The little urn.
In the little urn, which is only 4 inches tall. There we are, there's the little urn, although it looks like quite a big urn there, but it's only very tiny. And of course, whoever wins that, it stays at Lord's. They don't get to take it back.
But do they not?
So if Australia win the Ashes, they go, congratulations, they have their picture taken, and then the little urn goes back into the museum at Lord's Cricket Ground.
Now, talking about the little urn...
Yes.
Eric and Ernie.
Yes.
Right?
Are you going to Luton?
I saw the connection.
Very good, yeah.
So Eric Morecambe was a great Luton Town supporter.
Yes.
And you know, a lot of people will be looking. They debut in the Premier League.
Yep.
And a lot of people will be thrilled to see who they're going to play in the fixtures. And the fixtures will be released
at 9 o'clock.
Right.
9 o'clock this morning. So the Premier League released them at 9. There's loads of things around. If anybody looks on Twitter or looks at social media and go, oh, look, I can see, it's nonsense, because there's always people that will put this list together just to try and get people to look at them on social media. So it's 9 o'clock.
Look like a dream fixture.
The dream fixture. I mean, everybody always looks for that first one. Well, I mean, what's the first one you look at? Is it Liverpool? Is it Spurs away? What's the first one you look at?
Well, of course it's United, but it would be interesting to say...
No, I mean who you're going to play.
Yeah, but for instance, say it was Luton.
Yeah.
I mean, a dream tie for Luton would be something like, you know, Liverpool, United, Arsenal, whatever, Spurs at Kenilworth Road.
Of course, first game of the season.
First game of the season. But if they were away to one of the big grounds as well, they're just going to be glad to be there, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be fantastic. But with you personally, do you look at Christmas? Do you look at when we play Liverpool? The Spurs game's the big one for you, obviously. So
yeah, it is the big game and you and me will both be going to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully. But I tell you what, Paul, the situation, because of TV rights and various things, they move, so there's no point. You can't fix transport things in, whatever it is. I just take it. I love the surprise. Who are we playing this week? Who have we got?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's times we go, who are we losing to this week? Who are we going to beat this week? But anyway, it's 9 o'clock, so everything's all put together. It takes ages. There's all these different ways and permutations, but it's all about, I mentioned earlier about if you play at home on Boxing Day, then you'll be away on New Year's Day. Can't play 3 home games on the bounce.
A nightmare.
It's got to be 3 and 2. So anyway, the computer does all that. But often, I find that, there's different fixtures seem to be at the same time of the year.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that is. They'll always deny the fact there's a reason for it.
We always seem to play Liverpool in March. Will it be the second match in the season? But yeah, there are things that crop up seemingly around the same time in the year. Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll find out 9 o'clock anyways.
Talking about fixtures, the Women's World Cup will be screened. There was a lot of doubt.
Yes, there was.
Whether it was going to be screened terrestrially in the UK, but what can you tell us?
Well, they have worked that out because it was our great friend Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, this wonderful man who, today I am this, and we know exactly what you are there, Gianni. But as far as he's actually talked about the Women's World Cup, and he said the fact that the bids weren't enough. He said that there should be higher bids, that the TV company's not paying enough money, and he's saying it's disrespectful to the women's game, it's disrespectful to women. How about the fact that it's Gianni doesn't get enough money for FIFA? That's what he's worried about. Yeah. But anyway, finally something's been sorted out, so we can say that it will be screened on both ITV and BBC. And England versus Haiti, which is the first game, 22nd of July, so the Women's World Cup.
OK.
So we will be able to see it, which is great.
A sad bit of news there about Chelsea legend John Holmes, who's passed away. John's the father of Chris, TV presenter, and winner of Strictly, I think.
He was, But John, as a player, and I met John a few times. What a lovely man. And I know always when someone passes away, you'll get tribute saying how lovely he was, but he really, really was. Fantastic footballer, played at Chelsea, played for Queen's Park Rangers in the first game I ever saw.
Really?
Which was Spurs versus QPR, when Spurs lost 3-0. He was playing in that game. But and then he went to Arsenal, did really well at Arsenal. So you would think that I would have nothing but unhappy memories about John Hollins playing for Chelsea, Arsenal, and winning play for QPR. But I've got nothing but nice things to say about him. That glamorous team of the 70s, but a really lovely fellow.
Yeah, if my memory's correct, that was a team of a Chelsea team of Peter Benetti and Charlie Cook and Alan Hudson various people like that. He would have played.
Peter Osgood.
Peter Osgood, of course.
Yeah. Hutchinson with the long throws. Real glamour. David Webb, a real glamorous Chelsea side that won the FA Cup back in '70. So, the King's Road, that was the time to play for Chelsea.
Thanks for that trip down memory lane. You and I can do that Jack Hargreaves out of town with a football theme.
No, can you imagine?
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Thanks very much.
I thought they'd never end.
Right, get you off and let us know who's playing who after 9 o'clock this morning. Thank you, Paul Coyte.
In the meantime, we're going to be discussing campaigners pushing for more paid paternity leave with the papers and Freddie Gray and Stephanie Tetchy next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Look, at this stage of the game, we'll bring you up to date with today's front pages and let you see those. The Nottingham attack continuing to lead on most front pages.
Yes, here's the Times with the heartbreaking photograph of the parents of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar as the families came together for a vigil.
In the Mail, 2 fathers lost in grief, Sanjay Kumar, David Webber, coming together and urging students to look after each other.
The Telegraph, leading with Boris Johnson's accusations that senior Conservative MPs are guilty of hypocrisy, as that Partygate report is due to be released this morning.
And the Eye says homeowners are turning their backs on the Conservatives as rising interest rates increase the cost of mortgages.
And we're going through the papers again with Freddie and Stephanie, and moving away from sort of the top stories in this review to some of the inside pages. And Freddie, you've chosen this about paternity leave, page 5 of The Guardian.
Yes, this is a story that nearly a third of fathers take no paternity leave at all. And this is because our paternity allowances and our paternity payments, £172 a week, are significantly less than other countries. And this is by a group. They have I'm not even sure if I should say that they're owned, because the name of the group is actually quite rude, but they're owned by the think tank, or directed by the think tank, Centre of Progressive Policy. And they are very keen to make paternity leave more attractive in Britain, because the theory, and I think it's true, is that the gender gap, the wage gap, is reduced when you have more paternity leave, because women are able to get on with their careers more, because fathers are able to help out more. I think it's probably a good thing to give fathers more freedom to take paternity leave if they need it. I personally was immediately back to work because it's hell. the first phases of a child. I'd never been earlier into the office.
But didn't you
feel...
Or later home.
Or later
I'm
home.
sure there's so many dads
Things
that,
are very busy today. Absolute hell.
But didn't you feel like you was missing out those key early moments and stages?
Occasionally, but then I'd come back and there was just crying children, and I thought, I need to get back to the office.
But Freddie, you're missing the point there. I mean, you doing that might have affected your wife's career prospects.
That is true. My wife was not working at the time, and I'm just a selfish guy.
I think, Steph, when you talk about key moments, there's so many key moments with children that nobody takes into account.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they're 5, when they're 7, when they're 12, you know.
It's an ongoing thing.
And it's, personally, I've never been convinced of the need to be there, you know, while they're in swaddling clothes, you know, but...
I think it's scary. Like, a lot of women I talk to, or a lot of my friends who've had children, it's like once you've had the baby and you're leaving the hospital, it's like you're left to your own devices. You don't know, if it's your first one, you don't have no idea. You've got this little human that you have to be looking around constantly around the clock, and then your husband or partner goes back to work. I think it's quite a scary process for women.
I've got through those first 2 weeks without my husband, absolutely, and it was terrifying. The day he did go back to work, you're right, Steph, it was that moment of, right, this is me on my own. Actually, the company he worked for, he got 2 weeks paternity, but I think it was just after he returned, they changed their policy and allowed men to take 4 months off, and he just missed it by 2 days or something, which would have just been wonderful if he'd have been able to do that.
So let's talk about the story in the Mail. Vicar of Dibley and Dawn French.
Yes, Vicar Dawn French, she resurrected her character Vicar of Dibley for a very good cause, for her friend Chris Hallinger, who is stage 4 breast cancer, and rather than waiting to do a funeral after she's passed, she's decided that she wanted to do a funeral while she was still living, so she can let her friends and family know how much she meant to them. She's a close friend of Dawn French, so Dawn French was the one who done the service for her, which I think
surreal.
Yeah, I think it's quite, you know, funerals are quite morbid affairs, and you're talking about someone who's no longer here, and I think actually power to this woman, you know, she gets to have that key moment with her friends and family and to express how much she loves them, and it's kind of turning its head on what funerals are, and maybe she might be setting a new trend.
That's a very brave thing. Imagine what it would be like having your funeral and then saying, that was lovely, that was very good, and then you go home that night and switch on Coronation Street. You know, and... You know, it's kind of just, what must the feeling be like?
In a way, it should be, because I think, you know, when it comes to Western society and death, it's not something that people talk about, and we don't celebrate when people pass on. So I think, you know, as time goes on and a lot of people have terminal illnesses such as cancer, it's taken that power back from cancer and actually getting to say goodbye on your own terms.
Yeah, well, it's the getting to say goodbye bit. I mean, how many times have you been to a funeral and thought, actually, the person in the coffin would have loved to have been here because all of their precious people are in one place?
Yeah.
This idea of a living funeral, I really like it.
Did you hear the story? I think it was Latin America and Brazil. The woman who knocked on her coffin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they realised, well, 3 days later, so she was still alive.
She's still going.
Oh, it's the
She's done a Jesus move.
I actually texted my brothers that day and I said, did you all check? Did somebody really check? Yes, gosh, scary. But then there's that great Edgar Allan Poe, isn't there, a book about the... is it the House of Usher, whatever? And it starts with the man is dead in coffin, and he wakes up and he scrapes the coffin to get out again.
Yes.
That is my biggest fear.
What's Craig David up to, Steph?
Craig David, so he made that song 7 Days where he said we were making love Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday and a Sunday.
Is that all?
Yeah, but now he's saying he's gone totally celibate. He's saying he hasn't had no nookie in about a year, and he's saying the reason why he's done that because he wants to have a meaningful relationship with a woman. He's realised he spent his 20s and 30s and, you know, very short flings, and he said it was nothing meaningful. He's now 42. He says he's been celibate for a year, and he's hoping by doing this, he can start a relationship on the right footing. And I think that is just the way to go, because we're very much a sex-mad society, and that's not helping people have long-term relationships. We have this swipe culture, everyone's disposable. So I wish more people, more men like Craig, spoke about stuff like
But maybe
this.
you have to sow your wild oats to get to that
Yes,
stage
you do,
as a man.
actually, you
I
do.
don't know, but I could imagine a lot of guys probably don't want to start out in life going celibate to have that meaningful...
Well, that's why they have midlife
What day did he
crisis.
chill? Was it Sunday or Monday?
I think it was Sunday he chilled.
Sunday he chilled. So he's
Yeah.
now just chilling full time.
Every day's a Sunday.
Let's talk about wokeness, Freddie. And this is in the army. How are things changing there?
Well, this is a classic woke story, rather amusing headline, "Get fell in, you horrible little Guards person." And the story is that General Sir Patrick Sanders is poised to remove the terms guardsman and rifleman and replace them with guards person and rifle person. It's obviously annoying for a lot of people who are riflemen and guardsmen or guardswomen. You can be a guardswoman or a riflewoman. That the rank, which is something you achieve in the army, is taken away from you, and it's a classic political correctness.
What I don't understand
story.
is women are humans, right? We're human. So what? I wouldn't mind if I was in the army to be called a rifleman, because I don't understand why people get so het up about all of this.
It's just a title, and I think, when it comes to qualities of what's feminine, what's masculine, it's all interweaved and intertwined, and I just think, some women, they demonstrate more masculine traits, some men are a bit more feminine, and it's about, can the person do the job? It's not the title.
Well, they actually quote a female section commander in the Rifles Battalion who said, "Don't you dare take this rank away from me, because I'm proud to be a rifleman. That's my rank as much as it is yours." So why are they doing it?
So when you were younger, or if you've ever watched an episode of Star Trek, the original series, and you've William Shatner saying "Space, the final frontier," to go where, bravely go where no man has gone before. Now, I always, you see, as a man, I don't think about that, but I think man means mankind.
Yeah, I agree.
As Isabel was saying there.
Yeah.
So therefore, I don't have an issue. Am I naive with that?
No, I think that, I think most people will take it as mankind as a species.
And you would you?
Yes, I would. I feel, even though I'm a woman and I celebrate being a woman and all things feminine, it'll be a bit weird to hear womankind, because then that feels solely for women.
Yes.
But I presume they do not play Star Trek anymore with that opening title. I presume it's
that'll
been...
be long gone. That'll be a thing of the past.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't show the repeats, is what I'm trying to say.
No.
That would be revoiced or whatever as no one.
But I just don't understand why people get so offended by this stuff. It's not meant to attack people or minimalise one particular sex.
Yeah.
It's just making an issue out of nothing, and there's so much more we can be getting, up in arms about when it comes to gender topics.
What about Donald Trump, Freddie?
Well, the Eye is reporting that he is starting to lose some popularity among independents.
It's about time.
But I'm afraid to say, I think they're slightly overreading the numbers. His popularity among Republicans continues to be very strong and has in fact increased in the last 6 months quite
To
significantly.
be about a sort of third of Republicans, roughly?
About a third, yeah. And also this strange dynamic that happens every time so far. This might be different with this Files case at the moment, but so far, every time he has been in legal peril, his popularity goes up. And that's a very odd dynamic, but it keeps happening.
Guys, great talking to you both. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good Thursday.
And to you.
Thank you, Freddie and Stephanie there. Let's bring you up to date with the situation news-wise, and a report concluding that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson misled Parliament is to be published later this morning. The Privileges Committee will decide whether Mr Johnson committed a contempt of Parliament by misleading MPs, by denying lockdown rules, were broken at Downing Street. He quit as an MP on Friday after receiving its verdict.
At least 79 people have drowned after an overloaded migrant boat capsized and sank off the southern coast of Greece. The search continues for survivors. It's believed around 750 people were on board the vessel. Local media say the boat was on its way to Italy, having departed from the south of Crete.
A British Sign Language GCSE is one step closer. The government is hoping it will be taught in classrooms in England from September next year. A 12-week consultation will be launched shortly. An historical day for us here in the studio as we talk royal affairs with our American royalty expert, Kinsey Schofield, who joins us now. Lovely to see you.
I'm so happy to be here.
And so you are. So are you jet-lagged?
A little bit, yes.
Yes.
But, you know, I think that this is a pretty big weekend and I wanted to be here.
Now, explain to people why it is, in royalty terms, a pretty big weekend.
You know, well, I want to see King Charles on a horse. We haven't seen a monarch on a horse for trooping since 1986. I was born, unfortunately, at that time, but some of our viewers were not. God bless them. So I'm excited to celebrate the King's birthday. I think we all love the balcony moment, and I'm not going to lie, I'm just looking for a Louis sighting. But this is a celebration of the King's birthday, and some of us want 2 birthdays and don't get one, but he does.
So this is his unofficial birthday,
Yes.
and the I don't know which particular unit of the military troop their colours, and they walk, or they march down the Mall or up the Mall, which is one of the other, into portcullis. Gosh, right, I'm messing this up. What's it called? The Horse Guards Parade.
There was the amazing year where the Queen came down on her horse and someone fired a starting pistol 2 or 3 times, spooked the horse, and she, but she's an accomplished horsewoman, as is King Charles, because he's a very accomplished polo player.
But what I think the world is going to watch, because no one does pomp and ceremony the way you do. No one does, you know, tradition the way you do. It's the choreography. It's you know, the uniforms. It's just the most beautiful display. And I don't know of anyone else in the world that compares to some of these events that you put on.
And goodness me, with their bearskins at the weekend, in the rehearsals, so many of them passing out, and you know, one after the other. And the Prince of Wales, William, coming out and paying tribute to them in the evening, because they were so worried about a number of them. So professional.
And how handsome does he look in that outfit? Every history book is going to have pictures just from the rehearsal itself. I cannot wait to see what he looks like this weekend.
But we're going to have to wait and see what Prince Harry's visa application looked like, because it's not been released.
That's right. The Department of Homeland Security says to the Heritage Foundation, we don't see the value in this. We don't think it's you know, of interest to the public or important to the public to know. And so the Heritage Foundation is now coming back and saying, because the Department of Homeland Security is worried about Harry's privacy, the Heritage Foundation is saying we're going to sue you for this information, because again, the Heritage Foundation is trying to prove that the reason we're having a migrant crisis is because they're not doing their job. This would be an example, a global example of them being irresponsible.
Or they're not checking their facts.
That they're either they're not checking their facts, or that they didn't even push him on this subject.
And the controversy surrounds what? I mean, what could be? What is the information that could be
that Harry's
problematic?
been very open about his drug use, and he's been, you know, he's talked about it in Spare in a recent interview to promote his book, whether it's, you know, hallucinogenics or marijuana, mushrooms. But I think the most offensive thing in Spare, Eamonn, was the fact that he was disrespectful to Graceland. That is our White House, Elvis's home. The fact that he would be critical of Elvis and Graceland.
Say about Elvis?
He said that he thought that Graceland was he was not impressed by the property, and he thought it was kind of gross. This Elvis, self-made man, came from the gutter basically, and bought that property because he loved and respected his mother and father. Harry should take.
As you know, I'm a massive Elvis fan.
I do.
But I've never been to Graceland's, and I hear it's small. It's smaller than you would expect. Have you been?
I have. It is smaller than you would expect, but it is homey, and you understand why he would feel so safe there with his family.
Well, Harry seems to have an aversion to kings, doesn't he?
He has an aversion to kings. He has no respect for the elderly.
Speaking of kings and crowns, the new episode of or series of The Crown, more details coming out.
Well, this is all over the papers in the States. Page 6 recently picking this up in People magazine. Again, Meghan with Harry, they're going to go into the Nazi uniform. I think the reason that this is of interest in the States is because Harry is also technically an employee of Netflix. So the fact that Netflix would magnify this surprises a lot of people. But we're also going to go into the death of Diana, and that's going to open up a lot of old wounds for Prince William specifically.
Yeah. Why for you particularly? You talked about, you know, being born in the mid '80s and whatever, and what was it about the royal family? And you know, you're a very competent, very good reporter, but you're also, there is a fascination. This is your hobby as well.
Oh yeah, I bought a Kate Middleton mask last night. I'm not gonna lie. It's
What did you pop out for? This is what made me laugh. You popped out to get
hairspray.
Hairspray, and you came back with the Kate Middleton mask.
Get one for Isabel because
I thought about it.
We're the biggest fans ever, aren't we?
Today, as I was watching you from my hotel room, which I love that I could watch GB News from my hotel room, amazing. I had Kate's face above you and Isabel, and it was just the perfect little triangle.
Oh, look at that. But tell us, last time you were in London was for the coronation of the King, and we saw you, and you had an incident in your hotel room. I hope it was better standards this time. Mice.
I did have a mouse in my hotel room. I hoped you were going to go into meeting Will and Kate, but no, I did.
We were a bit mortified. We feel like, you know, ambassadors when we need to show you the best of the country when you're here, as you're such a British fan.
But you know what? When I get to hang out with you, I'm at Buckingham Palace or I'm here. So you raise the standards. You make everything okay.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Did you understand that message I sent you? I hate Mises to pieces. Did you know that?
Is this another
Jinx.
song?
No, it's a cartoon.
Oh, I'm going to have to Google it.
Mr. Jinx.
That's so cute.
I hate those Mises to pieces, an American cartoon.
I'm going to have to Google.
Anyway, there we go. Thank you very much indeed, Kenzie Schofield. Thank you.
Stay with us. We're expecting that Privileges Committee report any minute into whether Boris Johnson misled Parliament. We will bring you all the details as soon as we have them. But first,
the weather. Aidan McGivern with that.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's another stunning day today, sunshine and very warm once again for many of us, but an increased chance of some serious thunderstorms for some later in the day. For the time being, high pressure in charge, that's to the north of the UK. Still an easterly airflow, keeping things cooler on the east coast, but inland widely temperatures will quickly rise through the morning with the wall-to-wall sunshine. As temperatures rise, there's likely to be a bit more cloud development, I think, especially towards southern and southwestern parts compared with Wednesday. But actually, for most, it's a fine day to come. Odd shower possible across North Wales as the temperatures rise, and they will rise once again into the mid to high 20s, widely above average for the time of year, but a bit more limited there for the east coast of England. Into the evening, however, some serious thunderstorms are likely to get going across Ireland, and they're most likely to drift north into parts of Northern Ireland, especially western parts. And where these hit, we could see some frequent lightning, large hail, torrential rain. Could be some impacts from those storms, but they'll be very localised. Otherwise, it's largely dry overnight, clear spells, but temperatures remaining at 15-16 Celsius across parts of the south. So a muggy night for sleeping, but a widely sunny start once again. On Friday, any thunderstorms across Ireland move away for the time being, but they develop once again into Friday afternoon and more likely to hit parts of Northern Ireland into the afternoon and evening, whilst other storms could develop across northwest England, southwest Scotland, parts of Wales as well. Once again, these will be very localised, but where they occur, they're going to be pretty lively. More widely, thunderstorms and showers will develop across western and southwestern parts on Saturday, and then across the rest of the UK generally into Sunday. And at the same time, it will turn a bit cooler.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Boris Johnson recklessly mislead Parliament.
9 o'clock is the time. It's a Thursday, the 15th of June. Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The long-awaited report on Boris Johnson's lockdown gatherings at number 10 is due any moment as the former PM calls for a member of the Privileges Committee to resign. We'll bring you all the details as it's published.
The grieving families of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar came together in Nottingham last night for a vigil attended by thousands of mourners. Yesterday, the third victim was named a 65-year-old school caretaker, Ian Coates.
The Prime Minister addresses the illegal migrant crisis as he says his Stop the Boats message is working.
That's an important strand of our work to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration, and that's because the criminal gangs use a business model that tempts people here with the offer of black market work.
Happy to reflect what you want to say. GB Views at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News. The Privileges Committee report due out any second now. It follows a 14-month investigation into whether former Prime Minister Boris Johnson actually misled Parliament deliberately.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, is here. Good morning to you, Tom. Look, waiting with bated breath, and this is frankly going to be box office, isn't it?
It certainly is. We're expecting a 30,000-page report, included within it a response from Boris Johnson and indeed a response to that response. Some of that rigmarole is why this is a little bit later to publication than we expected, but we are expecting this in the next couple of minutes. It has not dropped yet. I am keeping my eyes very carefully on when we just might get it, but crucially, the big question mark over this report is what sanction will they recommend for Boris Johnson if indeed they do recommend a sanction, and will they conclude that he misled Parliament or otherwise? Crucially also within this document will be how do they reach that conclusion if they do reach the conclusion, as is widely expected, that Boris Johnson misled Parliament. How do they get to that point? What are the crucial elements of that decision? And I believe we might have, here we go.
Yeah, we've got it.
We do have this report. So this is live reaction to this report now, which has been put together with the formal minutes relating to the report too. I'm going to scurry away and start reading this and get some conclusions for you, and I'll be back with you in just a moment.
Well, you know what I can do? Actually, now that this has been released, and just as we go through it and pull out the main lines, I can read what has been pre-released to us, which is Boris Johnson's response to that report. And unsurprisingly, he absolutely rejects any suggestion that he recklessly misled Parliament. He says that Harriet Harman and indeed Sir Bernard Jenkins should both have recused themselves from the committee. They go on to say, and you just shout if you want to interject with any of the findings that you've got there, Tom, but I'll just read through some of the key parts of Boris Johnson's...
think perhaps before we hear Boris Johnson's response, we do now have confirmation that the committee has found that Boris Johnson misled the House.
OK.
They said that he had knowledge of the COVID rules and guidance, had knowledge of breaches of the rules and guidance that occurred in Number 10, and crucially misled the House on 5 separate occasions, which I'll just detail briefly now.
So does that mean deliberately misled the House?
That does. So they say he was deliberately disingenuous when he tried to reinterpret his statements to the House to avoid their plain meaning and reframe the clear impression that he intended to give, namely when he advanced unsustainable interpretations of the rules and guidance. So those are the words deliberately disingenuous included in this report. But there are several instances here as well where they say that he failed to tell the House about knowledge of gatherings. He said that guidance was followed completely when he was present at gatherings where it wasn't. When he said that he relied on repeated assurances that rules had not been broken, but that the assurances he received were not accurately represented. So there's just a number of different ways in which this committee is claiming that he misled the House. Of course, he takes a very, very different view.
Well, we can reflect some of those views that he's made then after you've given us those highlights there, Tom. He obviously was privy to this report before any of us were, and so he's been able to put together this long, it must be said, also a long document as well, but the highlights being that he doesn't accept effectively the impartiality, it reiterates this line about the kangaroo court, also mentions, it should be said, Sir Bernard Jenkins and the hypocrisy there, and he also makes a few jibes at his successor, I should say, Rishi Sunak. He talks about, I, like the current Prime Minister, believe these events were lawful, and he goes on to say, it wasn't just what I thought, it was what we all thought. Chancellor Rishi Sunak was also fined in circumstances that I still find puzzling. So lots of satisfaction.
Let's get reaction from the opposition now on this. James Murray, Shadow Financial Secretary of the Treasury. James, good morning. This is just dropping. So Boris Johnson misled the House. Any surprise in that for you?
Well, I don't think I'm surprised, to be honest, that that's the conclusion of the Privileges Committee, based on the reaction of Boris Johnson himself when he saw the draft copy of the report. I think we knew that it was not going to make good reading for him, given how he reacted when he saw that draft copy. But what I was kind of hoping is that when the report finally came out, I was hoping that maybe Boris Johnson would finally take responsibility for his actions, for all the damage and hurt that he's caused. If he'd finally say, right, bang to rights, I'm going to take responsibility for what I've done. But it looks likely that we're just going to see, more of him blaming everyone else and trying to discredit the institution and saying that he's done nothing wrong.
put some of the allegations that he's making, particularly to the chair of that committee, Harriet Harman. He says, people have been warning me for many months that this was being driven relentlessly by the political agenda of Harriet Harman and supplied with skewed legal advice with the sole political objective of finding me guilty and expelling me from Parliament. He goes on to say that he thought the putting together of this committee was ridiculous, a political stunt and a time-wasting procedural stunt by the Labour Party.
Well, look, this committee is chaired by Harriet Harman, who's one of the longest-serving MPs, widely respected across the House. It's got a Conservative majority. It's a respected cross-party institution, and I think Boris Johnson should respect the conclusion that they've come to. And what this just shows is that yet again he is failing to take responsibility for his actions, for all the damage that he's caused, and he's trying to blame everyone else without taking any responsibility himself.
He was particularly upset that she expressed what he considered prejudicial views, and he said that this would not be tolerated in a normal legal process, hence the reference to it being a kangaroo court.
Well, look, I think Boris Johnson will come up with any excuse to try and evade responsibility at this stage. We've known that this committee has been looking into this matter for a long time. People know that Harriet Harman is a respected MP, one of the longest-serving members of Parliament. People know it's a cross-party committee, a committee with a Conservative majority, by the way. I think that's really important to emphasise. And this is a committee whose findings should be respected. And I think, what this just shows is Boris Johnson is again kind of trying to make up any lines that he can to try and take away from the fact that he's done wrong.
Difficult day for you, James. This is dominating the news agenda, of course, and you're here to talk about global offshore wind farms and various things like that. Any quick line that you'd like to tell me about that?
Well, I think you're right in that, we politicians, the media and so on are kind of being consumed by this never-ending Tory soap opera and how Boris Johnson and others are reacting to what he's done. What we should be talking about is the future of our country. And actually one of the critical things we need to do is move to clean energy by 2030, which is Labour's plan that we set out. What Miliband will be talking about today is our plan to quadruple the amount of offshore wind in our country, which would not only bring down energy bills and increase energy security, but critically create 120,000 jobs by 2030. So it's critical for economic growth and critical for the security of our economy and our country.
Yeah. So you see clean energy and more jobs.
That's right. So clean energy is a really crucial part of making sure we have energy security, bringing down the cost of energy bills, obviously tackling the climate emergency. But also, I think what this report today really drives home is that it's also critical for jobs, for growing the economy, for making sure we have jobs in all parts of the country. I think with offshore wind, there's a real focus on Scotland and the Humber in terms of where those jobs would be located. This is a really important way that we can grow the economy in the coming decade if the Labour Party won the next general election, following 13 years of low growth and high taxes from the Conservatives.
Does it help us with energy security?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, what's happened in terms of Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine is it's really shown us how dependent we are on what happens around the world when it impacts on oil and gas prices. Now, if we had, homegrown renewable energy sources, we would be more energy independent, we'd have greater energy security, and we'd bring bills down, and that has to be the future for our country.
Okay.
James Murray, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. He's the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Tom Harwood.
There is an astonishing section in this report whereby we learn the recommendation for the suspension of the House. Now, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not this would reach 10 days. That's the threshold by which a by-election petition could be triggered. The report actually says that were Mr Johnson still a member, he should be suspended from the service of the House for 90 days.
Whoa, OK, gosh.
90 days. And that is not just for deliberately misleading the House, so they claim, deliberately misleading the committee, so they claim, breaching confidence, so they claim, but also impugning the committee and thereby undermining the democratic process. And further to that, they now recommend that he should not be entitled to a former member's pass. That's the privilege that any former MP can have to access the parliamentary estate. This is the most astonishing response, and I think that potentially Boris Johnson might be, in some peculiar way, pleased that this is public here, because it does look, on the face of it, really quite vindictive. A 90-day suspension is an astonishing...
And that's for calling them a kangaroo court, is it?
Well, that is, yeah. It's not just for the charge of deliberately misleading the House. It's also for, quote, impugning the committee and undermining the democratic process of the House. But this does look like an incredibly vindictive response.
And I suppose the fact that this will then go before MPs on Monday and they will be able to vote on the committee findings will able to sort of pass some of that responsibility of this judgment to the House to decide whether or not they accept it. Because what you will hear and what we are hearing from Boris Johnson is he will reject these findings, but it has to be put now to the people who've been elected by all of us.
It does. So this committee, the committee is putting forward a recommendation. The House will vote on it. We learn at 10:30 this morning when the House votes on this and how they will vote on it. Penny Mordaunt will stand up at the dispatch box of the House of Commons for business questions, which happens every Thursday. But today it's a special one because it's all about, well, not all about, but it's encompassing this report. And the government's response to this will be absolutely key. I think the fact that there is this 90-day suspension and the idea of banning a former member's pass, normally the only people who have their passes, their former member pass revoked, are real criminals.
Disgrace,
people who have
sexual
been
misconduct or whatever it might be.
I mean, frankly, I don't want to use the words that have been thrown at the people who've had their former members' passes revoked. This is an astonishing conclusion.
So he jumped before he was pushed then? 3 months he would have been out of business.
Well, not just 3 months out of business. This would have created the conditions for a recall petition. Just 10% of his constituents could have then pushed that, and it would be very hard to see how he would have avoided a by-election.
OK, well, we can't avoid To The Point at 9:30 today. It's going to be sizzling on the basis of this. Andrew and Bev.
Yeah, I mean, 90 days is amazing. And I was talking to some MPs in the Commons yesterday afternoon, and it's clear the committee has been mightily offended by Boris Johnson saying it was a kangaroo court. The reason he said that is because Harriet Harman, who chaired the committee, yes, she's a distinguished MP, yes, she's a lawyer, but she made it absolutely clear a year or 18 months ago Boris had broken the rules. Now, Chris Bryant would have chaired that committee normally. He recused himself because he'd said just that. Boris had broken the rules. I think Harriet Harman should have recused herself. Doesn't alter the fact he clearly did mislead Parliament, according to these MPs, but it's given him a fig leaf by which he can attack the committee.
I mean, we were just debating yesterday. We thought people were saying 20 days they were expecting. I mean, this, as we say, really significant. And as Tom was sort of hinting, it might also provoke some sympathy for that argument. This has been heavy-handed, disproportionate, perhaps, to previous Prime Ministers.
I'm just looking back. The only other MP who had a longer suspension in the last 30 or so years, that ghastly Keith Vaz.
Oh, right.
Remember?
Yes,
and that was all to do with the fact he was procuring drugs for male prostitutes. And he was banned for 6 months. However, if Boris Johnson comes back as an MP at the next election, all of this goes away.
Well,
just falls away.
The box office then, Bev. Thoughts?
If you've been on my side of the fence for the last 3 years, you find today quite difficult because it feels like it's not as relevant to people. I feel like this is Westminster getting wrapped up in Westminster, and I think the majority of the public are sick of talking about Partygate. They are sick of this. They just want politicians to get on with the job of making our lives better. So I will have something to say, but it may not necessarily be
and real life is what's happening in Nottingham.
Absolutely. And we'll be up there quite a lot.
All of that with Don. James Murray was making that point before, and he was saying, you know, it's about jobs, it's about what we've got to do with the environment and whatever. And you're right, however salacious all of this is and attractive it is to all of us, it doesn't help govern the country, does it?
No, I mean, I'm just going through Boris's actual response, which is pretty interesting, because we know he's a good writer. First and foremost, Boris Johnson is a journalist. That's what he always was a cut-and-paste journalist, in my opinion. But his response is very interesting, so we'll be looking at that as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much indeed. Look, we're going to keep Tom here. Obviously, he's going through... Are you talking 30,000 words or 30,000 pages?
30,000 words. So a short book rather than
when I heard 30,000 pages, I thought, dear God.
That's a long read.
More details, and Norman Baker's coming into the studio as well, and he'll talk about what he's making of these findings that we're revealing all the time.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you are just tuning in, we have now got our eyes on that long-awaited report concluding that Boris Johnson misled Parliament with his Partygate denials having now been published. Let's get the top lines from Tom Harwood, who remains in the studio, going through the entirety of it there and really not holding back, are they?
They're really not, and I think the key point that will be brought to again and again and again is no matter the 30,000 words contained in this report, no matter the annexes, the letters, indeed even the pictures in the report, frankly, the headlines here will all be about this 90-day recommended suspension. 90 days. It's just a different order of magnitude to what people had been discussing, whether it would reach that 10-day threshold or not. And it seems that this has been an exacerbated sanction recommended by the committee due to how Boris Johnson behaved before the committee and how the committee has interpreted his language around the committee, what they describe as being complicit in the campaign campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. Well, I think Boris Johnson would disagree with that strongly, but clearly that's the view that the committee
But they're
has
making
come
a
to.
statement that far from being irrelevant or a kangaroo court, they're saying we matter, we count within this House, and they're laying down the law. Norman Baker, former Minister, Lib Dem Minister, joins us now. Norman, that penalty, that 90-day penalty, as Tom was saying, for deliberately misleading the House, deliberately misleading the committee, breaching confidences, impugning the committee and thereby undermining the democratic process of the House, being complicit in the campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. And they also recommend that he doesn't get a former member's pass.
And John Bercow didn't have one either. I think there's another example of that. Look, I think the committee is right, and Boris Johnson is guilty on all counts, according to what we've seen from the report so far. I had a chance to skim it, as Tom has. Haven't seen the full thing yet. But look, I mean, we've had Boris Johnson releasing his own version of events before the committee published its report. That is a no-no in Parliament. The committee has the right to publish its report first. He had the opportunity to influence it and to seek to make corrections, which he may have done or may not have done, depending on how you interpret what he said to the committee. But he had to wait for the committee's report to come out. Instead, he attempted to preempt the committee, to make the story his story, to cause a by-election. He wasn't forced out of the House by the committee. The committee makes a recommendation to Parliament, which then decides what to do about the committee's report. It could have ignored it. And then, even at that stage, there would be a recall petition on his constituents' side. So there's no way he was forced out by Harriet Harman or anyone else. This is a committee with a Tory majority on it, and he's now attacking Harriet Harman, attacking Bernard Jenkins. He reminds me of Donald Trump, who was talking about witch hunts all the time and kangaroo court. Everybody's guilty apart from him, it seems. There's a massive conspiracy of everybody.
Norman, would that be a deliberate comparison? Would Trump be a mentor for him? Would he be studying Trump, or is that just coincidental?
No, I think he's learned from him. I think he has, because what Trump has done is made himself a victim, and he's managed to corral a large part of the American population to believe that to be the case. And I think that's what Boris is doing here.
Well, let's just read some of the response from Boris Johnson. He says, "This report is a charade. This is a dreadful day for MPs and for democracy. I do not have the slightest contempt for Parliament." He says, "For the Privileges Committee to use its prerogatives in an anti-democratic way to bring about what is intended to be the final knife thrust in a protracted political assassination, that is beneath contempt. It's for the people of this country to decide who sits in Parliament, not Harriet Harman."
Well, the people of his constituency could have decided had he stayed an MP and had a recall petition served upon him. I think it's disgraceful to attack the committee in this way. They've sat for over about a year. They've got Conservative majority. They've got respected members of Parliament who are well established. And if we're going to have people, including a former Prime Minister, dismissing a committee like that, that's just beyond the pale.
You say a former Prime Minister, that doesn't sound the language of a man who's decided to put his tail between his legs and go and hide in a dark corner, though.
No, he doesn't. I mean, I think he wants to come back. I think what he wants to do, frankly, is to damage the Conservative Party, so Rishi Sunak loses the election. He then wants to present himself as a prince over the water and come back on a charger after the next election to, quote, save the Conservative Party. I think that's what's in his head.
OK, Norman Baker, thanks very much indeed. If people tuning in, just a reminder then of the highlights of this finding. The Privileges Committee report said that if Mr Johnson was still a member, he should be suspended for 90 days. They said he deliberately misled the House, deliberately misled the committee. He was found guilty of breaching confidence by them, impugning the committee and thereby undermining the democratic process of the House and being complicit in the campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. And they recommended he should not be entitled to a former member's pass.
Well, that's a developing story here on GB News. We'll have it covered throughout the day. We say goodbye to you for today, and let's hand over to Beverly and Andrew, and they will be right on to the point. Here we go.
Good morning. We're chatting about Boris Johnson's statement. We're chatting about the report, and we're going to be looking at it in detail, like we say, 30,000 words.
And also going to Nottingham, of course, to get the latest in that very sad city after the vigil for the 2 students who died.
Yeah.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is